Okay, we can do roll call.
Mayor Larry Jacobs,
I'm here.
Committeeman Hickey,
Here.
Mr. Catalini,
Here.
Mr. Rodelius,
Here.
Mr. Leonard,
Here.
Mr. DeGenini is not here, Ms. Arvana. Here. Mr. Walter,
Here.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes, here.
Ms. Christie is absent, Chairwoman Gotcha.
I'm here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk, sent to the Bernardton News and the Courier News, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 6, 2022.
Please stand for the flag salute. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public for anything that is not on the agenda. If they have any questions or comments,
There's no public online. Is there any public?
any public? All right, then we will close it to the public for now. And we have some homework we need to do here. We'll do our minutes from October 6th. How do we vote for this, Tom, since we had a split decision?
On the minutes, you just, for the minutes, is everybody.
Everybody? Okay.
Everybody who was there
Mhm,
or listened to the tape of those.
mhm. Okay,
And she, I think you do roll call and that. So you might, if you're worried about, it, you can do them all, both at the same time, I think. But it's not a matter of who voted yes or.
okay, all right, that's what
On
my
minutes,
question.
on Minutes on the resolution.
Yes, okay. Okay, so we need a motion to approve.
Actually,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
anyone second?
I did.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
We weren't there.
You were not there. You were here.
Yep, you listen.
How was it?
You was not. Okay,
Was I here?
You were. for the-
yeah, you were here.
You were.
You were
The
here.
next one,
The next one, you were not here.
Okay.
Last week you were. or
And I approved
last week.
October 6th.
Yes, you do. Okay, so those minutes are approved. October 13th, we need a motion for those minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining. Anna and Lou.
Then Lou, yeah, oh, you're abstaining on that one. All in favor? Yes, we did that already. Okay, so those minutes are also approved for the 13th. Now we need the resolution approved for 1525 Bedminster LLC. Now, who,
this will just be the people who voted no. So it's,
Myself, you and Tim, I think.
Yes.
You would know.
Yeah, it's-
George and.
no, it's Jeff, myself, and Tim.
Oh, Jeff or something like that. So
Yes.
these people who voted no. More like resolutions of the people who voted that way. Carry it, 2 out of 3 is that carry.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, and roll call?
Mr. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Walter.
Aye.
Chairwoman Gotcha.
Aye. Okay. So we can go to our hearing for the master plan. Who's going to be the spokesperson? Frank, are you the spokesperson? Who is?
Or maybe Paul's a plan.
Change it at all. if you do it.
Yeah, we're all moving around tonight.
I'll try to, since everybody's been through a long process to get us here, I'll try to cut to the chase. Through the collaboration that the township and Somerset County have worked over the last year and a half, some significant findings were determined about the AT&T site And this master plan amendment is essentially a proposal to update the zoning standards that apply to that 190-acre property. What we're recommending here is a change. So you'll see that there are land use plan map attachments to the ordinance, or to the master plan rather. There are also a zoning map and a zoning map inset. Those are really to be attached to the ordinance that the governing body is preparing. And the map that you're concerned about for tonight is the land use plan map. And that's the one that shows the new RDOL zone where the AT&T property is located on the zoning map. So the purpose of tonight's hearing is to review the master plan amendment as part of the statutory requirement for the board's adoption following such a hearing. And as you may recall from the conversations we've had in the past, and I can't assume that anyone in the public heard those conversations. So again, a brief overview. It was determined that for the AT&T site to thrive in the 21st century, we needed to have our zoning realigned in a way that the high-tech, biotech, life science, and other clusters that have been developing in and around Somerset County could grow and continue to grow in Bedminster. So a lot of what we're doing here seems like fine tuning. We haven't made the kind of a change that would call for residential development on any part of the site, but we have included a variety of other land uses, more specifically identified than they had been previously. And apart from the research office, laboratory, and development spaces, there is an opportunity within that zone for up to 300,000 square feet of retail or other spaces, including, among other things, a conference center and hotel, restaurants, breweries, event space, art galleries, retail shops, commercial recreation, indoor or outdoor, gyms and fitness clubs, theaters, childcare. The intention here would be that over time, what was once a single user site and with a lot of the limitations of having been developed for that one user can now be adapted or modified, or in some cases replaced with uses that will again thrive into the 21st century. So this master plan amendment makes a recommendation that this new RDOL district be superimposed over the entire AT&T property. And then another portion of this master plan amendment relates to some municipal land use law considerations regarding sustainable, resilient planning, and requires specific findings by the board as part of this, which is your next land use plan amendment, to include this description, which you'll find as you read through it, identifies the statutory requirement for smart growth, storm resiliency, and environmental sustainability findings and recommendations. When we look at those things, because Bedminster's master plan was so heavily based in what it is this is all about, you sort of get a pretty good report card there, but it calls to mind that there's still work to be done. And that's acknowledged to a certain extent in the findings here. There is also a resiliency section that talks about what kind of exposure we have to a variety of hazards. The county's all hazards plan was very useful in making some of the findings here about the township's exposure. The fact that we don't have coastal storm hazards because we're not near the beach, so we don't have wave action and things like that, doesn't mean, as they seem to continue to widen out the floodplains every time they get remapped, doesn't mean that we're not going to see increasing flooding in areas that we already know have flooding. So part of the findings here are intended to direct attention, and in some towns, they maybe have never paid that much attention to this, at how you might recognize and then address problems like flooding and other responses to other natural or man-made hazards. So that's the, in a nutshell, version of what's included in these 10 or so pages. If there's any questions about that material or the map, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions on the board?
I do have a question, and I apologize, but I wasn't here at the last meeting. The accessory uses, conference center, restaurant, so on and so forth, is that to be only as an accessory use to the already possibly future existing, use that we're talking about, for example, like, the uses that are there?
Lou, I think in our last conversation, it partly revolved around the question of whether these were actually going to be permitted as principal uses or whether they could only occur in conjunction with some other use as an accessory. I think where we all came down on it was they have to be permitted as principal uses, in part because our theory of the plan is that we will have a variety of individual users coming in within those use groups to try to cluster together in what we hope will be a high-tech, biotech kind of place. So yes, those other uses are now intended to be primary intended uses, limited by that 10% of the total development potential of the site.
Okay, and and it's 300,000 square feet that's available.
That's correct.
And do we think that the access back and forth with the roads can accommodate that kind of? I mean, we know if there's office space there and if there's research there, we have a certain population of workers and people that are there. But now if you add in another 300,000 square feet, some point in the future possibly, of customers, consumers, people that come and go, can those roads handle it?
I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't discount it at all. And I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not giving you that
Right,
expert
of course.
opinion. But I
I
think we
just
have
want to raise
asked,
the question.
I think we've asked them this question, and what they said was that this was about as highly designed an intersection and an access location as you would get off the state highway system. So, and it had the capacity to accommodate all of their rush hour in and out traffic into the state highway system. So the theory is that it should be pretty good to go. 300,000 square feet in the kinds of uses that we're talking about is not like having a regional mall or, it's not 1 million or 1.5 million square feet. And it's likely, I mean, if you get a lifestyle gym, that might be a third of that whole space. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly what it'll turn out to be, but part of the intention here is that this mixture of uses, and you'd see in a lot of other settings, they would be talking about making this a 24-hour environment with live, work, and all that other stuff. And a very specific determination was made here that it was going to be not residential, but that it would try to foster this sort of bubbling up, a place where the kind of industries that we want to see could come, start to grow a little bit, maybe need more, that whole cycle that we try to see these uses go through.
Right.
I would suggest, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, I know that the county was a tremendous partner in this whole process. And I'm not sure if Walter Lane, who's the county planning director, would like to say anything about this, but since we're in the public comment period, he certainly could be invited to the mic if he wants to.
All right, thank you,
And if
Frank.
he doesn't want to, he can sit right there and I'll.
Yeah.
He already did his work, so.
I
I
just
go back to the first question though for a second. So we established that it wouldn't be a quid pro quo kind of thing, that we're not going to permit the ancillary uses unless and until there's other development, more of the planned and intentional development, so to speak, non-amenity,
Right, I know what you mean.
non-accessory.
Right, the
for lack of a
primary,
better-
the
for
other
lack of a
primary
better
use.
description. But if somebody with an accessory use wanted to come in because, the developer thought that would be a magnet for further development, it ultimately becomes a chicken and the egg thing. So
Right.
we're not making any decisions about which comes first, the chicken or the egg.
We're not
We're saying
forcing,
that either solution, albeit the accessory uses are more strictly limited, either use could apply for development rights and
at
move forward.
any time, separate from one another, that's correct. And we think that flexibility is going to be part of what makes, having, you might remember that Walter and the county economic director suggested to us that we throw a couple of words into the plan that were really important that we didn't have in there before. Aseptic manufacturing. Words, buzzwords that tell somebody right off the bat, they know what they want, what we do. So we're trying to be clear about some of those things. And then these amenity uses, amenitizing those environments seems to make them more attractive to the others to come in. So I think it's a really good combination, and I commend the county's always done great work with the township, but this has really been an exceptional
And
case.
only because Lou wasn't here last time, but my takeaway from the discussion about traffic was if the traffic in the roads can accommodate rush hour morning, rush hour evening
Right.
for 3,500 employees on the site, with this sort of development, mixed use, the uses are going to tend to be more spread out over the course of the day as opposed to concentrated into those otherwise peak periods.
That's exactly
Was
right.
that your takeaway? Because that was mine.
To the extent that those are going to be part of the load, they won't be part of the load when the high-tech people are showing up for work first thing in the morning in the office or whatever. You're right. Yeah. All good.
Okay.
Frank, we're still not going to do subdivisions, right?
Someone could.
We haven't ruled it out.
We haven't ruled it out.
The board has to see it. Okay. So in
Okay.
other words, anyone who wants to do anything here, other than just move right in, that Verizon or something, but basically, other than someone who says, I like the way this, I'm moving in, I'm taking over the tenancy, they have to come to you for at least a preliminary final site plan.
Mhm,
And if they propose to subdivide, they will have to include in subdivision that
mhm,
explains how.
mhm.
And as you talked about in the past, someone might do something that's involves condominiumization of the land or the building.
Mhm.
You would be able to diversify their ownership.
Which you don't have to approve, but
But you don't
Trent does.
approve that, but, basically that could happen without a subdivision is my point. But the site plan would show what the developer or developers.
And how many acres or whatever they
That's
need.
right. It's a little complicated because the way the property is
Right,
configured to
right.
do a subdivision, to tell you the truth, but
Right,
it's possible.
uh-huh. Okay,
But just to confirm, this is non-residential. You know, when we say subdivision.
Yeah, right,
stuff,
right,
you start
right.
That's right. That's right. There's
Okay.
no residential division. It was not recommended. It is not being recommended in the master plan amendment.
There's no permitted use here.
no, okay. Anybody else on the board? Anybody? I will open it up to the public. I don't know, Walter, if you have any comments or anything more?
So thank you for the opportunity and thank you for partnering with us on this very important planning effort. So the township should be commended for undertaking this. This is really proactive planning, and this will help ensure the economic health and vitality of the town moving forward. Couple of questions. There is, what you're proposing, there is a market demand for, and there's a lot of people waiting to hear once this is finally adopted. So I think this is going to be very successful. Thank you for all the compliments. Only if my commissioner, my administrator could hear that. But we can send a video.
Yeah, right.
No, this is really good. This, as you know, this is one of our priority growth investment areas in the county. This is very important. And this has been a great partnership, and we look forward to seeing the implementation of the zoning and working with the township. And just to address the traffic question, yes, having this mixture of uses will, and spread out the traffic during the day. And the recommendation for aseptic zoning is definitely going to put you on the map for that type of investment. There's definitely a demand for cell and gene therapy production and research facilities in the state, and it's just growing. We are in the heart of that research, almost a research triangle between New York, Philly, and us right in the center. So it builds off the great workforce that is in Somerset County, our tradition of being the medicine cabinet of New Jersey. So this is going to be, I think, ensure long-term success.
Okay. Any questions for Walter?
Yeah, but just to point out, Walter, I mean, you've been at this with us for a long time. I recall that I was sitting in those chairs when this process started, with priority growth investment. So it's not like we did this overnight.
No.
This is years and years in the planning and making. So thank you for your efforts in that regard.
Yeah.
This is what we're here for.
Mhm,
Thank you.
mhm. Anyone else for Walter? No? Okay, thank you, Walter. I guess we'll open it up to the public. Anybody online or?
I would just like to make a comment.
Sure, Steve.
I'm new to the planning board, but I know that amazing amount of work has been done by a lot of people. And I think it's really appreciated. It should be appreciated by all the public. And I think at least I wanted to note that.
Good point. Mhm. Nobody, Janine?
No.
And in public, no. Okay, I think we're ready.
You have before you a very short resolution that approves, have the planning board approval of the land use plan amendment. I recommend it to you. I don't recommend any changes to the master plan amendment, but if you want to make any changes, you have to make them on the record tonight, and Frank has to incorporate them into the document tonight. We're doing this effective tonight, and then it gets sent to the county planning board, state planning commission, and notices get sent to various people. It's on top of it, so is there a motion to approve the land use plan amendment and the resolution approving it?
I'll make the motion to approve the master plan amendment as drafted by Frank with the resolution Tom provided to us.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, I think we need a roll call, Janine.
Mayor Larry Jacobs.
Aye.
Commitment Higley.
Aye.
Mr. Travellini.
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius.
Aye.
Mr. Leonard.
Aye.
Mr. DeGenini.
Aye.
Mr. Urbana. Aye. Mr. Walter.
Aye.
Mr. Hurst.
Aye.
Chairwoman Petrov.
Aye.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Frank.
Now we have to do-
Everyone who went with us.
Hey, you draft the
This master plan amendment.
Yeah,
Great-
Good job.
Great planning, everybody.
Good job.
Way to do it.
It's a long tradition of good planning, but it's more than what's happening.
Thank you, Frank.
Yep, good job. Okay, well,
They've already moved.
if the planning board has any questions or comments, now's the time. Yeah,
One
seeing
thing that
that,
you should all know is if the county committee introduces the ordinance, they will then send it to you, possibly next Thursday night for the consistency review. And to a lawyer, this is perfectly consistent because your master plan is now.
includes it.
And the ordinance presumably will be perfectly consistent with it. And it's an easy review. You gotta make the call, okay, so, but these are what you love in defending the zoning.
Okay, I think you're excused.
They can actually participate.
Oh, they can. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Not excused.
Well, you're not excused.
Who are you?
You had 2 seconds and you missed the up, so.
Tom?
Okay. So we will, well, I guess our Route 206 LLC has been now postponed again till December 9th. We think,
So we said.
so we see. Okay. We're ready for the Goldman application. If you'd like to come forward.
Good evening. My name is Bill Robertson. I'm from law firm Francesco Bateman, Huntsman, Davis. Here tonight I represent the applicant, Stephen Carmen Goldman. Mr. and Mrs. Goldman live at 140 Rattlesnake Ridge Road. It's block 38, lot 11.04. And it's located in the R10 Rural Residential District. The Goldmans Property contains a little over 10 acres, 10.12 acres, and is presently approved with their existing single-family dwelling and pool, which is located almost in the center of the property. The property is about 900 feet long, 500 plus feet wide, various depths, and it is buffered on all sides. And you'll see from some of the aerial photographs that the buffer is have been submitted. It is significantly buffered on almost all sides from the properties. Mr. and Mrs. Goldman are proposing to construct a tennis court and in order to allow greater enjoyment of their property for themselves, their children, their family. Tennis enthusiasts, and they are interested in constructing that tennis court. The court would be located at the rear of the property, which again, if you look at the aerial photographs, you'll see it's significantly buffered and set back from any of the adjoining properties. It is also located in an area that is currently just lawn area. There's no significant trees or any disturbance of any environmentally sensitive areas. It's intentionally located in an area that right now is relatively flat and a lawn area. So it should have minimal disturbance on the property. The Goldmans are seeking a variance for lot coverage. The existing property is slightly over the 5% lot area.
Sorry, I just think this mic is way better.
The existing lot area is 5.9%, which is slightly over the permitted 5%. And that's largely a function of the setback of the house, the orientation of the house, and you'll see again from the aerials that there is a driveway that has to get up to the house, and house is oriented to the side, so there's a turnaround in the front of the house. Those are all existing conditions when Goldman's bought the house in 2011. Nothing has been changed other than that existing driveway configuration hasn't changed. But about 7 or 8 years ago, the Goldmans actually paved that. It was impacted and compacted gravel prior to 2015. It was paved in order to improve the safety of it so that it could be plowed. So it was a safer situation. But other than that, there have been no improvements to the property. With the proposed tennis court, the lot coverage increases to 7.53%, which is by an additional 1.6. So the Goldmans are here seeking a variance from that lot area percentage in order to construct the tennis court, which is permitted accessory use in the R10 zone. With me tonight will be Mr. Goldman, Steve Parker from Parker Engineering, and the applicant's professional planner, Henry Hinterstein. Although I would note that Mr. Goldman will have to participate by Zoom tonight. He had an unexpected illness in the family, so he will be participating by illness this evening. So unless there are any questions for me before I start, I would propose to introduce Mr. Goldman. I believe he should be on the Zoom.
I'll swear him in then. Mr. Goldman, please raise your right hand. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And state your name and address.
Stephen Goldman, 1140 Rattlesnake Bridge Road, Bedminster, 07921. And let me just at the outset apologize for not making it in. One of my sons has not been feeling good this week.
Mr. Goldman, you are the owner and the applicant of the property at 1140 Rattlesnake Bridge Road, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you describe for the board the existing property?
Sure. So if you come in off of Rattlesnake Bridge Road, we're just north of Red Tail Farm. So you would pull up into the driveway, and then you'd go up about 250 feet, and then there's a split in the driveway. You can go to the right or you can go to the left. right down the middle between those two driveways then is a middle island with trees and some foliage and whatnot. So let's say you continue up the left side of the property, you would continue up. Eventually, you would reach a circular driveway on the left, and you would see the main home on the right. And to the just to the right of the home is a paved front driveway, a basketball court, and then behind the home is a pool and gazebo and a horseshoe pit and whatnot. And then if you go past the house, continuing east, we have a fence which basically separates the front property from the back property. So if you look at the property in totality, it's 10.8 acres. The front portion of the property is about 7.1 acres. And then it's split from the back part of the property by a split rail fence. And the back portion of the property is 3.1 acres. So if you opened up that fence at the gate past the house, you would walk into a huge field, nothing in it but grass and trees. To the north, you have woods, which separates my property from my neighbor to the north. And then if you walked all the way south, you would walk and you would hit another set of woods with a trail which separates my property from Red Tail Farm. If you walk to the very back portion of the property, past where the proposed tennis court is, you have additional woods there. And I think my property runs maybe another 25, 50 feet back, and then a neighbor's property, which must be way set back because I've never even seen the home, abuts us and the woods over there. So the proposed tennis court location is basically dropped right in the center of the back property in the big field. So it would be about 200 feet or more and separated by woods to the north. And it would probably be about 350 feet separated from Red Tail Farm with woods, a trail, and then another set of woods which abuts the Red Tail Farm property. So that would be about 350 feet. Nothing would have to be taken down with the proposed construction of the tennis court, other than one ash tree, which of course everybody knows are dying all over Bedminster and New Jersey. So that's a question about whether that will have to come down or not. But other than that, there would be no destruction of foliage or greenery or trees or whatnot. And our planner is proposing a further buffer to the north by putting in additional trees to supplement the 150 feet or 200 feet of woods which separate my property from the neighbor to the north. So that's pretty much the layout of the Goldman property.
And Mr. Goldman, can you describe for the board what it is that you're proposing to do with respect to the improvements?
Sure. Well, we want to put a tennis court in. We want to put it in regulation size. And we'd like to put up the requisite or customary fencing around the court. And we would seek at some point to have lighting which conforms with the town ordinances on lighting.
Presently, there's no lighting proposed with the court, but if you were to do that in the future, it would conform with the township's ordinance with regard to recreational lighting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in terms of the structures that exist on the property, have all those been there since you purchased the property?
The home, the pool, the gazebo, and a driveway existed. But when we first took occupancy of the property in 2011, the driveway, which actually runs from Rattlesnake Bridge Road up to my front door, is about 400 feet. And that driveway, plus the circular portion of the driveway, which goes around the front of the house, and the split to the right, were all gravel. And that's original construction, I understand, going back to 1984. So when we took occupancy and later purchased the property, we had the gravel driveway, which we later had paved in the year 2015. And so now, and that's actually what put us over on the coverage, if I'm not mistaken. And additionally, we put in a pretty extensive drainage system to the northern side of our property on the far side of the circular driveway after construction, after pavement of the entire driveway.
So Mr. Goldman, the driveway was paved in 2015, did you say?
Yeah, the driveway was totally paved from street up to the house in 2015, 7 years ago.
And you indicated, could you describe, you indicated that there was a drainage system that was also installed at the same time. Can you describe generally, not from an engineering standpoint, but generally the type of drainage system that was installed that you're talking about?
Sure. Shortly after we put after we did the paving, we had a pre-existing, I guess you can call it a small swamping area by the fence. And to tell you the truth, every time we would look out the window after a big rain, it would take a week or two for that water to drain down, and so you would attract mosquitoes and bugs and whatnot. So after we did the paving, we engaged Prisco, Priscoe irrigation. They had done previous work on our property, and they put a drainage system in which ran from the fence, which separates the front property from the back property, and it ran all the way down the northern portion of the property just before it hits the street. And I forget what the term is. Steve Parker knows, I guess, into a shallow, I forget the word, but it dumps off away from the neighbor's property and down towards the street.
And since 2015, when that driveway was paved, were you made aware of any issues or concerns with stormwater runoff as a result of the paving?
Never. The first time we ever heard a complaint or an issue or were put on notice of any complaint was just after we filed for the variance, when you had to put the neighbors on notice of the pending application. And then for the first time, you either received a phone call or a letter from our northernmost neighbor there saying that rain was coming into his property as a result of the paving of our property, which, as we can discuss later through our engineer and some of the other work we've done, we've addressed that issue.
Mr. Goldman, I don't have any other questions, but members of the board or the public may have some questions if you can answer them.
Sure.
Anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. Goldman? No, I think he did a good explanation.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we open it up to the public if anybody. I don't think there is.
There's
Oh,
one
yes,
hand up.
there is. Yes, please.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, board professionals, good evening. Good to be back here. Rob Simon from Herald Law. I'm here on behalf of my clients, Andre Briscoe and Greg Lister, 1200 Rattlesnake Bridge Road in Bedminster. The property immediately to the north of this property and the neighbors that Mr. Goldman was referring to just a moment ago with regard to his testimony. Mr. Goldman, can you be on camera or is that not possible?
I don't think I control that. I think Janine is the Wizard of Oz on that one.
No, I don't.
I mean, I'm on my camera, but right now my screen is showing the plans for the tennis court.
All right, so
Sharing screen somehow.
Yeah, I can.
We are, but where it says his name,
Oh.
his camera was on, it would show his picture.
Yeah, on the
Just like
right, on the
our
bottom
pictures
there.
Up there where the town council is. So is your camera on?
My camera's on, yes.
He's got a toggle on, maybe
Yes,
the setting.
allow it to go.
Right. What do you think that is, Paul?
I think his camera's not on.
Yeah, right.
You gotta check your camera, mister.
Yeah, hit-
Okay, well, let me check my camera.
You might have to turn it off and turn it back on. The camera.
What kind of device are you on?
The camera I have is a Loratech, and the little flap
What
is.
kind of, are you on a laptop? Are you on a
No,
phone?
I'm on a desktop.
You go to the Zoom settings, I think he has to, right?
You just click on the camera, yeah.
Should be a video.
Bottom
on video.
screen.
Right at the
There you go.
bottom.
And down on the bottom tray, there should be a icon for video.
Video.
Right there.
Second from the left.
Where is that?
On the bottom, if you bring your mouse to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a.
There you go. All right.
Sorry about that.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Goldman. I appreciate that.
No problem. I apologize.
Yep, no worries. So just a few questions. So when you you've owned the property since 2011, correct?
No, we moved in 2011. We did a lease purchase and we took title in 2021.
Okay, so you have been, what, the tenant of the property from 2011 to 2021?
Well, I was under contract with an option to purchase, so we're living here pursuant to a financing and option to purchase. So
Right, I'm saying.
in other words, we were paying before we moved in rather than mortgaging after we moved in.
Right, but in terms of your legal status vis-a-vis the property between 2011 and 2021, is it fair to say that you were a tenant?
I guess that could be one of the hats we were wearing, and additionally, we were a purchaser because we were under contract. So you could call me tenant / purchaser if you'd like.
Okay. And when you took the property, the driveway from gravel to pavement, you said that was in 2015?
That's correct.
And is it your understanding that exercise is what resulted in the impervious coverage on the property exceeding the 5%?
Yes, I think it is.
Did you, prior to that work being done, were you aware of what the actual impervious coverage was on the property?
I've had surveys done over the years, but I don't think I ever was given the statistics with the exact impervious coverage prior to that.
So your understanding is that prior to paving the driveway, it was either at 5% or below, and then after paving the driveway, it went up to the 5.9%?
That, well, we've figured that out in hindsight. We didn't figure it out in foresight.
Madam Chair, if I could just
Yes,
make
Paul.
a quick point here, because the ordinance regulates lot coverage and not impervious coverage. So if the driveway was there, it was already coverage at 5. The fact that the driveway was paved did not increase the coverage on the property.
Yeah, but my understanding is were there areas of the impervious, of the gravel driveway, or the areas of the driveway that were increased in terms of driveway width, et cetera, by going with the pavement over the gravel?
No, quite to the contrary. The guy who paved us, who's a well-known local paver, he said our driveway looked like a road and he wanted to make it look like a driveway. So he narrowed the long stretches of the driveway, which ran from the street up into the house.
So in hindsight, the paving caused the coverage to go to 5.9%.
I just said that is not the case.
Well, wait.
It may be his understanding, but I just want to make it
That's
clear
what
what
he
the ordinance
testified.
says. Right.
I understand what the ordinance says, but
No, I don't think you do. So let's go over
Well,
that.
I do.
Let's go over that. I mean,
So if the gravel driveway was there and it was paved, the lot coverage did not change.
I
Under the
understand.
ordinance.
I understand that statement, yes.
Okay, so you're asking him if it increased because it paid.
And he answered the question. I'm going to move
Right,
on
because
to
he
my next
doesn't,
question.
apparently he's not as clear on the ordinance as you are.
I'm not
So-
sure about that. I think Mr. Simon knows very well. Right?
So, Mr.
You
Goldman,
know that it was 7 something before he occupied, right?
what do you mean 7 something?
5.9.
5.9, sorry.
You know that the lot coverage of the lot, when he started occupancy, was 5.9.
Well,
Right?
I-
You accept that?
if-
You
well,
accept
Mr.
that?
Collins, I'm questioning the witness.
I
Can
know, but let's
question the
go
witness?
over.
Because
You
I'm not
acknowledge that-
accepting.
You acknowledge that as a matter of law, that that's the ordinance, right?
I'm acknowledging what the law says and, or what the lot coverage requirement is, and I'm well aware of the Bedminster ordinance. I'm well aware of the fact that lot coverage includes the areas covered by unpaved stone and other semi-pervious materials.
Good.
I'm well aware of that. Mr. Goldman, do you know whether your predecessor owner or anyone in the chain of title ever applied for or received any type of variance relief in connection with lot coverage pertaining to this property?
Factually, I don't know, but in conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Stultz, who bought the house new in 1984, I'm pretty sure that there were no applications for a variance.
And do you know when the driveway was constructed?
My understanding was that was part of the new construction, which was built as a twin house to the Lister property on the northern side of our property, that those two properties were both constructed in 1984.
And with regard to your comment about lighting, does your application currently contemplate lighting of these tennis courts?
I don't believe so, but I'd have to defer to Mr. Parker for that, our engineer, but I don't believe so.
Okay, so your intention as part of this application is not to light the tennis courts, correct?
The application, the written pending application before the board this evening does not seek lighting, but the global plan, if we were to be approved for the variance, would be to seek some sort of conforming lighting.
And is the intention that seeking of lighting would require a subsequent application to this board?
That's a legal question. I'd have to defer to counsel or to defer to the engineer for that.
Yeah, that's fair. And with regard to the existing impervious coverage that exceeds the 5% requirement, have you investigated whether there's a way, because you understand why I'm here and what the issues are that my clients are facing, whether there's a way that you can reduce the existing impervious coverage at your property lower than what it is currently, lower than the 5.9%?
Well, the long answer is I'm not sure how that would apply or relate to your client's beef, but I don't really know how we could take out a portion of the driveway, you know, other than to create a moat or a small bridge to get from part to part. I mean, the driveway is the driveway. It takes us from the street. It's not fancy. It does its regular job that a driveway does. It allows cars to come in and leave and people to visit in a safe manner. People aren't slipping and falling, and cars aren't getting stuck in the gravel in the winter and the late fall and the spring with the rain and the soaking. So I'm really not sure how it could be done. I spoke to Mr. Parker about that, and I don't think we came up with a solution how you can reduce from 5.9 to 5, you know, on a 10.8 acre property.
Madam Chair, I'm not really sure what the concern is. You know, we've just initiated this line of questioning, but am I to presume that it's only about lot coverage, or?
It's a lot coverage variance application. And that's what I'm asking about. It has to, we have a huge water problem on our property.
That's the
And-
issue. That's the issue, is the drainage.
Okay, that's what, that's.
That's why all my questions are lot coverage questions, right? Like,
No, I just want to know.
in writing, which I didn't know about until tonight.
I just want to know what the concern was, that
The
the line of
concern is
questioning,
water.
you didn't preamble anything, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, the concern is water. And that's why I'm asking the applicant whether the effort was made to take the 5.9%, which is currently exceeding the maximum requirement of 5%, which amounts to, whatever it is, almost 4,000 square feet, and whether there's ways to minimize that impervious coverage. That's the line of questioning in essence where I'm going, and that's why I'm here
Thank you.
and what my clients are concerned about.
I have a question, if just 1 second. Tom, are we allowed to question the questioner? Because I'd like to get more clarification on what that water problem is.
That's why I asked.
Well,
Carol.
You're
Yeah.
allowed to, but he's not testifying.
Yeah, we'll wait for the
He
engineer.
says it's representation of counsel.
Wait for his
Which is
engineer.
their argument, but
Mhm.
it's no only legal argument. Now, that will come in his case, yet, I presume, he has a witness or two. So he's now in the mode of solely cross-examining the applicant's witnesses. He has asked a question by Rich, actually a helpful question. But in the opening statement, that's how the concern, but he did make an opening statement, so that shortens the case. So let's let them each do their cases and then ask witnesses questions.
Okay.
Mr. Goldman, in terms of the tennis court itself, so I didn't see any fencing on the plan. Do you intend to put fencing in?
Yes,
And is that fencing, do you have a height for that fence?
It will comply with the applicant, will comply with the height ordinance, and 15 feet is the height for a fence associated with his.
And are you going to be employing or using, what I'm going to call wind tarps, with the holes in them? As a tennis player, you see these outdoor tennis courts where the 15-foot fence is covered on all sides by these wind tarps to prevent, wind from affecting the play. You know what I'm referring to?
I actually wasn't, but maybe you can tell me a little about it.
You guys can do that offline.
I'm good. But the question is, you don't have any present intention of using those, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, thanks. I think there was a question, I don't know if Mr. Ferrero or Mr. Banish raised it in their report, about whether you intend to have any type of walkway or other impervious surface as defined by the ordinance, going from the living area back to the tennis court, because the tennis court is some distance away from the house.
I think we can actually hoof it those 60 or 80 feet from the house up into the tennis court.
I'm sorry?
I think we can hoof it from the house up to the tennis court. It's only about 60 or 80 feet. So the answer is no.
Thank you. And you talked about planting of an additional buffer to the north, which I'm assuming is adjacent to my client's property, which is located to the north, right?
That's correct. And that would be north of the tennis court.
North of the tennis court. So when you're talking about an additional buffer, where precisely are you intending to plant that, and what will that consist of?
Well, if you can picture the location of the proposed tennis court, and if you walk about 100 feet north, you'll hit the woods line there. So that's the start of the woods. So the additional buffer would be on my side of the woods.
When you say the woods, you're talking about the woods that are part of my client's property?
Well, the woods are actually all my property, as well as a portion of your client's backyard is my property. But we're talking about the woods which separate the two houses, not to get cute with you.
And in terms of the type of planting, in terms of species, height, number of plantings or trees, have you gotten that far yet in your planning?
the preliminary discussions were to do something tasteful that would serve to be a further buffer for sight. So in case there was an ability or an inclination for the neighbor to look through, that this would serve as a buffer and would take away any distractions of the tennis court. It would just kind of be doubling up on the woods.
If I may, the applicant's planner is also a landscape architect, and we will be able to address that more specifically in terms of location and the plantings.
Thank you. With regard to, Mr. Goldman, your comment about that you had a swamping area by the fence that attracted mosquitoes and bugs, where was that specifically?
All right, so if you walk past the circular driveway, there's about a 15 or 20-foot grassy area between the top of the driveway, the easternmost portion of the driveway, and the split rail fence, which takes you into the backyard. So about 15 feet to the north of the top of the driveway in that grassy area, after rain, we would get some water. And it would stay there, and obviously in the hot dry weather, it would dissipate more quickly. But in the spring weather, it could take on a big rain, it could take 3, 4, 5 days to dissipate before I put the drainage system in.
And that's the area that's adjacent to my client's property, correct?
Well, that's
On your land, though, of course.
that's 150 feet or 200 feet adjacent to your client's property.
And when you had Prisco Irrigation put in these drains that you testified to, do you recall whether permits were obtained for that?
I don't recall. I'd have to ask Prisco about that, but I don't recall.
And with regard to that drainage system that you put in after the pavement, is there any type of maintenance manual that is typically associated with drainage systems that was created for that system?
Not that I'm aware of. I can tell you since the drainage system was put in, the swamping stopped almost immediately. It basically took the water from the top of the property down to the bottom of the property.
Yeah, I have no further questions from Mr. Goldman at this time. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
Just ask one follow-up question for Mr. Gold. Mr. Gold, just to clarify, I believe you indicated that the driveway was there from the time it was originally built in about 1984, and it's essentially in its current configuration. Is that correct?
Mr. Robertson, could you just repeat that? You cut out at the very last part of that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just wanted to clarify, you had indicated, I believe, that the driveway in its current configuration was there at the time you purchased the property, correct?
At the time we moved into the property in 2011.
When you moved in, correct?
Right, and then when we took title, obviously, in 2021.
And is it your understanding that the gravel driveway in that configuration was original to the house when it was constructed in 1984, about 1984?
Yes, I know I'd say hearsay answer, but Mr. Stoltz told me it was.
With regard, I believe you also indicated that when the driveway was paved in 2015, the driveway was actually narrowed somewhat. Is that correct?
Yes, if you had ever been on on the property before we paved it, it looked like a wide, abandoned country gravel road. I mean, that's how wide and long and thick it was. Gravel falling onto the grass and this, that, and the snow would remain in there for months at a time. So what the paver did was, let's assume the width of one of the driveways running up from the front were 28 feet wide, he narrowed that to 22 feet. He tidied it up, he paved it, he raised it, and he moved, and he reduced the width of that.
So the actual lot coverage after 2015 is it your testimony that was actually reduced the actual lot coverage?
Well, if you assume it's 400 feet running from bottom of the driveway to the top of the driveway, and let's just say for argument's sake, he reduced the width by 5 or 6 feet, you could make an argument that there would be a reduction of 2,000 feet.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Mr. Goldman, with regard to the reduction of width for the 5 or 6 feet you just testified to, are there any plans that are on file that you're aware of at the township that would reflect that?
I'm not aware.
And with regard to your hearsay conversation with Mr. Stoltz, do you know for how long, I apologize, when did Mr. Stoltz own the property?
Mr. Stoltz was the original owner, Mr. and Mrs. Stoltz. When we moved to Bedminster in 2011, they had been out of the property for 5 years, living in Naples, Florida. The property was being attended to by a caretaker from 2006 to 2011, but they continued to own it until 2011 or 2012.
Thank you. And with regard to, I noticed on Mr. Parker's plan that there's a bridle path along the southern part of the property, correct?
Yeah, that's the path that runs between our property and Red Tail Farm that I alluded to earlier.
And do you recall what the surfaces of that bridle path?
It's mud and dirt.
Mud and earth, okay. And with regard to, I noticed from the aerials that were submitted as part of the application materials that there's a, I guess, a playground area or playset area in the front of the property.
We're going beyond the cross-examination, but
Well, I just wanted, he was describing the property, I just want to ask about that.
There's outside the garage, there's a driveway, which leads into the garage. And then to the west of that, there's a grassy knoll. And there you have a shed and you have a playground, trampoline and swings.
Okay, and that's grass covered, correct?
That's grass, yes.
Thank you.
Anything from Mr. Goldman? Seeing nothing? Janine, anybody? Any public want to?
Not alone, I don't know if there's anyone here.
I don't see anyone. I will close it to the public. Your witness?
the applicant would call Steve Parker from Parker Engineering.
Mhm.
Steve, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address.
I'm Steve Parker, Parker Engineering, Somerville, New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. The board recognizes and accepts the qualifications of Mr. Steve Parker as a professional engineer. Any other licenses, Steve?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Parker, you have been engaged by Mr. and Mrs. Goldman in connection with the present application, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And could you describe for the board the existing conditions on the subject property?
Yeah, it's the property is developed as a single family home. There's a driveway and of course all the other improvements that are there, such as a pool and patio. Quite a bit of the property is lawn. There's a buffer surrounding the northerly and easterly sides of woods. And of course, the bridle path along the southerly side.
And
Can we give a picture of it?
if, there should be one of the exhibits that's digital. Oh, yes.
That's the one
Right,
right
that's
there.
a plot plan. It shows the overall. And if I don't know if the board wants to see them, but there are 4 aerial photographs that would give a better perspective and might be worth.
You can pull them up, you just.
Yeah,
let me know
there
one.
were 2 sets of photographs. Which
I'm
one?
going to start with the first set. There's a series of 4. And if
Okay.
we took them in order 1 through 4, maybe Mr. Parker could describe them, and there are actually hard copies as well for the board.
So that is a view of the Goldman House in the middle of the photograph. To the right is the northerly property, and the red box that's shown is the location of the proposed tennis court. So you see the red box in the lawn area there. That's where the tennis court is proposed. This is a view from the east to the west of the Goldman House.
Go to the next one.
Next.
Okay.
This is again a similar view. It's just focused in more on the area of where the proposed tennis court is going to be placed. That's outlined with the red square. And again, the Goldman residence there in the background.
That last picture was facing south?
Facing west.
The one before this with the box was facing west?
Correct.
So if it's facing,
So
west,
Rattlesnake Bridge Road's at the top.
That's correct.
and the neighbor who's objecting this property is to the right, in other
Yes.
words,
Yep.
on this picture.
Not on picture.
Well, that's where it would be, just trying to
Yeah,
understand.
to the right.
Mr. Parker, these photos were submitted as part of your application plan.
That's correct.
So they don't have to be, I'm not going to separately mark them. As long as you go through each one and then explain them.
Sure.
Cross-examination as well, like 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're part of the application package.
Yes, correct. This is another view of the Goldman property. This is from the west facing east. That's the Goldman residence. That's right in the middle of the site. And again, there's an area at the top of the photograph outlined in red. That is the area of the proposed tennis court. You can see the driveway configuration there as well in the middle of the property, the paved driveway. And so this is from the west facing east.
This is looking south, right?
That's correct. This is a photograph, again, from the north facing south with the Goldman residence in the top right portion of the photograph. The proposed tennis court location is outlined in red, again, in the lawn area there.
What is that red area on the bottom of the photograph? It's a pond.
That's just a pond,
It's a
yeah.
pond. It's on the adjacent property. It's not on Goldman property.
That's on the property to the north, right?
That's correct.
So that's Goldman, that's the
Okay.
tennis court.
We can go back to the site plan, the plot plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Parker, again, just for the record, the property is identified as lot 38, 11, correct?
That's correct.
And what is the acreage of that property?
10.127.
And the zone it's located in?
In the R10 zone.
That's rural residential, correct?
Yes, correct.
And the property, again, you've described the improvements and you've shown them both on the plot plan and on the pictures. And would you describe, you've been to the property personally, correct?
Yes, I have.
And how would you describe the buffering around the Goldman property with regard to the neighboring properties?
It's pretty substantial. And if you just recall from the photographs, you can see there was a substantial buffer on the northerly side as well as the easterly side. And then even the front portion of the lot along Rattlesnake Bridge Road had a pretty substantial buffer of woods. So really the house itself and the developed areas of the site are really kind of in the middle of the site and it is surrounded by woods and trees.
And the current existing lot coverage for this property is what?
5.9%.
And what is the allowable or permitted lot coverage in the R10 zone?
5% is what's permitted.
And so that 5.9 is an existing condition today, correct?
Yes, it is.
Now, would you describe for the board what is proposed by Mr. and Mrs. Goldman with respect to this application?
The proposal is to construct a tennis court in the back portion of the property. When you look at the screen there, it's just a big rectangle up the top of the plan there. It's 60 feet wide, 120 feet long, 7,200 square feet tennis court. What we've also proposed is a drain surrounding the tennis court to capture the runoff from the court itself. That runoff will be directed into dry wells. The dry wells are shown on the plan to the right of the tennis court, the squares with the circle in it. That's to address the stormwater runoff from the tennis courts and allow for that to infiltrate back into the ground. That's really all that's being proposed, just the construction of the tennis court. There's no additional sidewalks or walkways or driveways, as Mr. Goldman testified to. And
the location of the dry wells is the reason why they're located on what would be the southerly side of the tennis court. The
Yeah.
proposed tennis court.
yes, it is. The portion of the property where the tennis court is proposed drains to the south. So it slopes from north to the south in that part of the property. So the dry wells are proposed on the downhill side, the southerly side of the tennis court and of the property, because that's where the drainage naturally runs in that portion of the property. So that's that area does drain to the south and away from the northern area.
And the design of the drainage, are the drains around the outside of the tennis court to collect any runoff?
Yeah, there's a drain system that is completely surrounding the tennis court. So any water that runs off the court will get collected in that drain and then directed into the dry wells.
And based upon the drainage system that's been incorporated into this design, do you have an opinion as to whether or not there will be any increase in the rate or volume of runoff as a result of this construction?
No, they won't. This is designed in accordance with the municipal standards for any new impervious or any new lot coverage.
Are you, the location of the proposed tennis court, will there be any impact on any natural features in that area?
No, and you can, if you recall from the photographs, it's really proposed to be in an area that's presently lawn. I think there is a couple of trees we're showing, I think some of those are diseased, that will be removed. I think Mr. Goldman referred to them as ash trees anyway, so they're dead. So other than that, it's in a lawn area. There's no impact to the wooded areas or any buffers that are naturally occurring out there.
And now, Mr. Parker, can you describe generally the topography on the existing site in terms of where runoff would go on this property?
So generally, the property, the house itself kind of sits on a higher area. And so the property to the south of the property drains to the south. And then the property to the area to the north of the house drains toward the north, but then ultimately toward the road or toward the west. And that's shown on the plans. If you look at where the topography, how the topography works, it is sloped toward the road, toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road, and toward the west. So generally, the property kind of runs to the south and to the west, run off the property.
And in terms of are you aware of the drainage system that was referred to by Mr. Goldman? Did you locate that as part of your plans?
We did, and you can see that it's shown on the plans. There's a drain, there's existing drain inlet on the drawing up there on the left-hand side. That's the inlet that was installed shortly after the driveway was paved. And then there's a drain that is connected to the to the drain inlet that then runs toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road to the lower part of the property. And that's where the outlet of that pipe is. So it drains that area and then it runs the stormwater out towards Rattlesnake Bridge Road.
And did you look at the topography to determine whether there's any type of a natural swale or any feature that would carry the water toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road?
There is, and in fact, that's what the plans demonstrate. When you look at the elevations that are there, the lines, of course, represent the contour lines, but the elevations show that the topography in that area drains generally towards Rattlesnake Bridge Road. I think Mr. Goldman described a flat area where the water kind of ponded a little bit, and that is consistent. There is a flat spot up there, but the drain has eliminated any drainage that occurred there, and it carries that out toward the front, toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road.
And you also heard Mr. Goldman testify with regard to the driveway that exists on the property. It's a paved driveway, correct?
That's correct.
And you're aware that the driveway was previously gravel, correct?
Correct.
Now, is there any distinction in terms of lot coverage between gravel or paved area?
No, there's not.
Mr. Simon, who was here cross-examining Mr. Goldman, indicated that the neighbor to the north has some concern with regard to runoff to his property, correct?
Correct.
And did you, in September of this year, go to the neighbor's property with a representative of that property owner to look at the runoff issues that were being mentioned?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe for the board what you did and what your findings were when you went to that location?
I met on the neighbor's property with their engineer, and we walked the property, both the property to the north, as well as a portion of Mr. Goldman's property as well. What we were looking for was any evidence that there was an increase in stormwater runoff, anything that would be siltation, erosion, maybe some between the properties is that substantial wooded buffer area. If there was a severe runoff problem, there might be evidence of some of the woods, sticks, or the leaves floating on the property. And in fact, the day we were there was immediately after a heavy rainfall the night before. I think it was over an inch of rain that night, but we didn't see anything. We didn't see any evidence of that, of those things. We didn't see any erosion problems. We didn't see any siltation problems. So I wasn't able to observe that there were any issues on that property.
And based upon the topography and the drainage system that you have inspected and reviewed, do you have an opinion as to whether or not the paving of the driveway would have caused an increase in the stormwater runoff to the property to the north?
I don't think you would have. I think when you look at the what's presented on the plans and the topography, the runoff from the driveway may initially be directed toward the north, but there's a swale there that carries that runoff out toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road. So in fact,
Can you describe this swale? I don't see it on the plan.
yeah, it's a when you look at the contour lines, which are the lines that are drawn on there, you can just read the elevations.
Yeah, well, I'm reading like 115.75 under the high point and 110 at the low point, 400 feet to the south, to the east.
Right. And so that's generally the way that the line falls. Yep, because that's those elevation numbers.
That's, for all practical purposes, that's flat.
Well, it's 5 feet of elevation change.
5 and 400 is, what decimal point you want to carry it out to, but
Yeah, not quite 400.
it's 0 for the first two anyway.
If you look at where the, if you look at where the 115 contour line is roughly, and then the 110 contour line, that's about, that's 5 feet of elevation change over about, 180 feet.
It looks more like 400.
We're looking at.
Well, I guess it's flat in front of the oval driveway in front of the house. And then
It's flatter, that's for
And
sure,
then from
yes.
that point, it's 5 feet in the last 100 or 150 feet. So
Correct, yeah, that's true. It's
up
flatter.
by the house, that middle section there, opposite the oval in front of the house, is pretty flat. And then from that point, it slopes 5 feet down towards the road.
That's correct. It's flatter up in that area you described. But you can see by the numbers that it does generally fall toward the Rattlesnake Bridge Road.
And what is that drainage system? Is that perf pipe? Is that solid pipe? What is that?
I don't know for sure because we weren't there when it was installed. But the appeared to be solid pipe just by looking at the outlet. I could see where the outlet was out by the, toward the road. So I think it's solid, it appears to be solid pipe right there.
So the swale, where those contour lines are coming to a point, that's creating the swale that you're talking
That's
about.
exactly correct.
Okay. And that's kind of, so whatever is collected on either side of that swale enters the swale and funnels down towards Rattlesnake Bridge Road. That's correct. In the corner of the neighbor's property. Yes.
Just for the two
So
properties coming
so
together.
the contour does go back up to the north on the north side of that swell?
It does in spots, it does. If you look at what those numbers are, the numbers represent the actual elevation. And so the lower numbers are generally on top of that dashed line, which represents the height. And then they go, they're higher as you proceed to the north.
Perpendicular to the property line though, on that side though, right?
Correct.
Okay. So going east, it's going uphill.
But all of this is isolated and separate from the proposed tennis court.
Absolutely, correct.
And
Yeah,
and the topography in the proposed tennis court. Jeff, can you just
Zoom in, yeah.
Yeah, zoom in on the tennis court
Yeah.
and topo up there.
This area right here.
Yeah.
We zoom in more.
Steve, can you just walk us through the topo lines up there at the court?
Yeah, if you look at the area where it says approximate disposal field, that's kind of a high point. And there's a, I say like a ridge or a high elevation from there to toward the house. So if you draw a line between the house and that disposal field, the area to the right of that line would drain toward the south, and then the area to the left of that line would drain either towards the north or towards the west, Rattlesnake Bridge Road. So most of the, well, all of the area where the tennis court is proposed drains toward the south.
How much regrading of the actual tennis court area, right? Like what's the differential, if any, between like the left side and the right side or the east side and the west, you know?
Yeah, so the elevations that we're showing on there, there's about 4 feet of elevation change from the left side, that's the highest side, to the right side. About 4 feet of
116.
elevation change.
So is the plan to excavate the left side or fill in the right side?
Fill in the right side.
Yeah, because the tennis court says 116, though, right? Yeah, so it'll be level with the existing ground on this corner here, on the upper left-hand corner.
Correct.
Northeast corner, okay.
The tennis court, that's 116 in all 4 corners.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the tennis court is at 116 continuously, it would be like a 2% maximum, right? Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Parker, regarding that drainage pipe. It's an underground drainage pipe?
The existing one, yes, it is.
Okay, and were you able to tell if that pipe was clear? And are there any clean outs in that pipe so that you could run water through there? I mean, does it drain properly? Can you tell us that?
I don't know, I can't say that. I didn't see any cleanouts, I just saw the drain inlet in the yard and at the outlet side.
And you know the gauge piping?
I know what you're referring to, but I don't recall what that was.
Okay.
The plan says it's a 6-inch drain.
6-inch,
And
40 gauge PVC? We don't know.
I don't think that gauge matters.
The reason I ask that is because 25 gauge sometimes is used to discount or to make things less costly, but it can collapse over time. I've had the same experience.
I think we interrupted the attorney. I'm sorry, sir, you
No,
had a line of questioning of your.
Rich, you're sorry for interrupting an attorney?
Really?
Are you one of those?
Don't let that get around.
The only other question I was going to ask Mr. Parker was just to clarify that the proposed application with regard to the tennis court, would that have any impact on the stormwater runoff toward the property to the north?
No.
That's zero impact, right?
Zero.
Yeah, one other point, it's just, along with that, I mean, if there's a little bit of the allowable pitch to have it a flat surface, the 1 or 2%, it would make sense, and your intent would be to have that pitch towards the south.
Yeah, and again, there's gonna be a drain completely around that tennis court.
Right, so it'll catch anything.
It's ground, it's gonna pick it up.
Okay.
Could you describe the drain? Obviously, there's an issue with water in this area. Did you observe any issue with water when you were out there doing the site visit in that area? And
In which area?
in where the tennis court's going to be?
I didn't see any issue at all. As I said, I was there on a day after pretty substantial right there.
And can you just explain the type of drainage system that's gonna go in there?
Yeah, there's a detail for it on the plan, but what it is it's just it's a trench with a pipe in it that's filled with stone. And so the runoff comes off the surface of the tennis court, it gets collected in that stone, it just, drains right into it. And then
There's a
it gets
detail.
carried by the pipe into the dry well system.
Okay, so the stone will be visible all the way, like kind of a moat stone.
It will,
And
yes.
the water will go right in there and then drain to the other side of the property.
That's correct, yes. Is there any maintenance required for that system over the long term? I'm sorry, is there any maintenance required for that system? Well, there's maintenance required for dry wells. Those have to be inspected and checked and just to verify that they're in fact working. They get cleaned out as, necessary when they get it. They do collect some solid materials, so they have to get cleaned out.
And how often is that done? Just curious.
It depends, on, what the upstream area is like, whether it's, if you're in an area where you're getting silt or even leaves or, that kind of thing, or, mud. Obviously, we need it more frequently than something like a tennis court where you're just gonna really have, pretty much just run off the top.
Mr. Parker, so could you zoom in on the dry well?
Yeah, the detail.
So we're all familiar with Bedminster clay and shell. So really, it would be the function of this dry well size and proportions to accommodate most of the water generated on that, because the water may not go beyond the three walls, the bottom and the sides of that dry well for days if it's clay and shale on either side and underneath it. Correct?
Well, it's designed to capture 3 inches of runoff off the,
But the gravel is going to hold, the pit of gravel is what's going to retain the water and collect the water.
well, the dry well itself is a concrete structure. It's a big concrete cylinder is what it is, and it's surrounded by gravel. So that provides the storage capacity that's required by the ordinance.
And then you have outlets within the dry well, and where you're taking the water once it's outlet from the dry well.
So that concrete cylinder has perforations or holes in it, and it gets collected in there, but then it just disperses into the ground.
Into the shale and clay.
Right.
It's like a detention system, really. Yeah. Okay.
And how do you go about sizing such a dry well? It's based on the area of impervious coverage that you're adding? And that's by formula?
Yeah, there is. The township has a.
Then how do you determine how the outflow, how fast that cylinder is gonna get rid of the water? How do you figure that out?
Permeability testing.
So you've done bird tests there?
We haven't done it yet. That's typically required by the engineer as part of the review of the plans. So your engineer requests that.
And normally it's done during the construction of the project. I will tell you that there is a septic system not far from this. Septic systems in this area of town are generally in the fractured shale where you do a basic flooding test where the water goes into the fractures of the shale. That's what's predominant in this area of town. I would be very surprised if that were not the case here. Generally, there's sometimes 12 or 18 inches of the heavier clay on top of the shales. Really decomposed, but you get down deeper where the bottom of these dry wells would be, you're gonna be in the fractured shale. Which is more.
Fractures generally follow topography.
The fractures are there. They're not necessarily related to the topography.
Generally more permeable than the clay such that we're.
Far more permeable than the clay.
Okay. I'm not the geologist, so I'm just asking.
But I did have another question for you. This property was built in 1984. There's no survey that shows the extent and the details with respect to the driveway?
I don't know. I haven't seen one.
Isn't there one available at the town hall someplace, or did it go away when the building flooded?
Or burn, whatever, yeah.
I would think we'd be able to determine that, and I'd love to see that. Again, I understand what you've done is to contain any additional runoff, any additional water that may run off as a result of installing the tennis court. You've designed to contain it on the site. But, you're coming in here as if the 5.9 is a pre-existing non-conforming use. And I don't know that we've necessarily established that somebody didn't do something over the course of the last 38 years to encroach on the coverage further than what was originally designed or approved.
Well, do we know when that ordinance, the 5% in the R10 went into effect?
I don't know, it was, I think Frank, you and I were here,
Was when the R10 went into effect.
which is
Early 90s.
early 90s.
So it's pre-existing.
So
So
maybe
to the extent
it
it
might have
was
been okay,
built
might have been
with the
okay, might have been before it was
It was
okay,
conforming
then
at
when we
that
put in
time.
the
Yeah.
5% along with the 10-acre
Mhm,
minimum, it became non-conforming.
mhm.
We can look, the R3% was R3% was the zoning before the R10. So we can look in the book and see what it said. I suspect that it was.
Again, the applicant has demonstrated that they're, solving for the tennis court. But the concern about any additional runoff with respect to the driveways is something I'd like to see answered.
But that's not the variance they're seeking. You're asking them to seek, to establish something that's not.
They're adding like 6,000 square feet of additional coverage, right?
Yeah, but you just said that if you're satisfied that the drainage addresses the variance before us, you're trying to fix, you're trying to fix it. You're trying to come up with a solution that's not before us.
Well, I want to know that what was done here wasn't done without anybody's approval. That's what I.
But you're not here as enforcement guy. That's not your job. You're not. Because Tom has told us in the past.
Yeah, Paul wants to speak. Paul wants to speak.
You haven't been deputized.
The current R3 district, okay, for lots 10 acres or more, 10% is the permitted lot coverage. That's in the current R3 zone, which is really
And I
taken
think
from,
we turned the old R3% into that R.
yeah, we took the percent off.
Right, so.
There was some variation in the lot area, the permitted lot coverage in the R3 zone for lots.
We can
smaller
research
than
that. I don't think we should do it off the top of our
Right.
heads.
I did have a couple.
But I'm being told it's irrelevant.
Why don't we just hear the testimony and then you'll decide? Okay.
If I could ask Mr. Parker a couple questions.
Absolutely, Paul.
Because I know there's a World Series game on.
Yes, there is.
Might be over.
There appears to be a question about 0.9% of the lot. How much of the lot, how much area is 0.9% of the lot?
So it's just under 4,000 square feet.
How many?
4,000.
Do we have a calculation for what the driveway, the area of the driveway?
Well, the numbers are on the plan. I don't have the percentage breakdown for that.
I think it's on the other sheet.
My other question is, what kind of drainage inlet is that at the top end of that?
It's a yard. It's so
Concrete or
it's not
plastic?
pipe, it's plastic.
Is it possible to put a couple more of them over the existing pipe to collect the areas in that driveway in case it happens to skip over some of that flat area and head to the north? Yeah, I mean, I frankly don't think that's very difficult to do.
Right.
And that would put the water down to the street, and Mr. Simon might be more twice. I guess. I'll let him speak.
I mean, it may, I mean.
That doesn't happen. But we'll listen to whatever you
Okay, hearing what I've heard and hearing where Mr. Simon's been going, I think particularly because of the nature of the construction of that system, a couple of additional inlets, probably 2 is all you would need over the top of those, similar to the one that's already out there. Not heroic construction by any means, but would collect that water and get it back down towards Rattlesnake Bridge Road from the runoff from the driveway, so it doesn't go to the line at all.
Makes sense. Any other questions, Mr. Parker?
The engineer, Paul Ferrero, wrote a letter. You had 4 comments. One was just admin, soil erosion. The details about the fencing and lighting. So when was that addressed? I know the discussion, I think, earlier was testimony that there would be fencing compliant, but it's not depicted on the plan. just-
We'll provide a detail for the fence. Because that is part of the proposal, but right now, there's no lighting proposed. If it ever is proposed, it would be conforming to what the ordinance requires.
Which is 15 feet for tennis courts.
And would they have to come back?
No,
No,
For the lighting, no?
so lighting would have to come back.
yeah, that's what I'm asking, yeah, for the lighting.
So the fencing,
The fencing is permitted under the zoning ordinance, would have to be shown on the plans, but the lighting is a conditional use, and it would have to come back to this.
so lighting would come back.
And what kind of fence are you proposing?
I don't know off the top of my head, I think it's probably some kind of chain link type fence that just, stop tennis balls.
Oh, okay, I understand. Okay, for the tennis courts.
Yes.
Mhm, okay. Mhm, I understand. Anyone else for Mr. Parker?
Just a quick question, I'm sorry, on the plans, it mentions both paved as well as gravel driveway, but now I thought it was all paved, so now I'm a little confused. It is all paved, no, it says gravel, that's an error, it's all paved.
It says 12,000 square feet.
In the coverage analysis.
Sorry, you're right, you know what?
Yeah.
That's an error, it's just all paved. The
Okay,
numbers don't change, but it shouldn't say gravel, it should say.
so it's 17,000 square feet of paved?
That's correct.
I'm a little confused on that. You're saying that it didn't change from the gravel to the paving, and yet Mr. Goldman said it did change, that it was reduced. So I'm a little confused on that.
Well, the confusion is on the plans, the numbers that are on the plans are intended to reflect the current condition. And it
Okay,
should say paved. I think it says gravel on there, in the chart somewhere, that's an error, it's all paved, the numbers don't change, but it should say gravel, I mean, it should say paved.
So when it was all gravel, it was larger than the 17,000.
The number would be exactly the same, the number would be exactly the same.
I think what he's getting at is Mr. Goldman testified, when it was an all gravel driveway, it was greater.
larger.
Oh, yeah.
What you depict on your plan.
Yeah, that's correct, I don't know, Mr. Goldman testified to that.
so the current condition now
Are these numbers?
are these numbers,
Yes,
and it's
correct.
5.9%.
Right, it's like 17.9,
That's right,
whatever
yes.
it is. you know,
Okay,
18,000.
all right. Anybody else?
And how much is the tennis court?
7,200.
So why do you need this big giant loop in front of the house of driveway?
It's obviously, it's been there, I think for the type of home that it is, this is, it's an estate, type area. There's a driveway for, the residents, and then there's a driveway for the guests that come out to the front.
Yeah, but looking at this picture, I mean, a lot of that could be eliminated. I mean, that's what I see. I don't see the need for that. I mean, I back in and out of my driveway.
George, I think what you're really saying is there's a lot of redundancy in the fact that there's 2 loops, right?
Well, it just seems like a lot of impervious. I mean, you're not getting a lot of your bang for your buck. You're losing out on the tennis court. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Maybe you could show us is there a garage in there?
The garage,
So-
is that this on the west end of the house? Is that the garage?
Right, so there's a drive to there, and then the circle is in the front, and that's the front of the house there on the
Yes.
left-hand side.
Mhm.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Front of the house faces north, towards the neighbor's property.
Yeah,
And then you have this extra loop that connects the main driveway to the garage.
yeah,
pad.
right,
Right, but you could get there either way.
It's superfluous.
right.
So
But that
everything
could be-
on that loop, starting on the right, as it loops up to the garage, is extraneous to the extent that you can still have direct, clear access the other.
So that's all paved now, that whole entire area.
Yes, it is.
Anybody else? Mr. Parker? We'll open it up. Anybody?
How many guest parkings, how many guests can park there?
A lot.
Sure. A lot.
Depends what they're driving, I guess.
Yeah. Not as many Bentleys. Okay.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Parker, did you consider modifying the existing driveway in order to come back in with a lesser variance?
Well, we suggested that to Mr. Goldman, and Mr. Goldman believes that this is, how his property functions best. It's what he's been used to, it's what.
Oh, you did, that was a consideration though.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Okay.
Janine, you want to see if there's anybody online? I don't think so, but no,
Mr. Goldman, yeah, and us.
okay.
Mhm.
Yes, please.
Before I start questioning Mr. Parker, if I can have a 5-minute recess to talk to Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's,
Will it make the rest of the meeting go faster? That's a question. That's a lawyer to a lawyer question.
Yeah, really.
Lawyer to lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Interrupting lawyers,
Yeah, right.
happens all the time.
I know the answer. It depends.
Very good.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute, we'll take a 5-minute break. Yes, okay, 5 minutes. Get going.
Thank you for your patience. Steve, good evening.
Good evening.
So you're not aware, I asked Mr. Goldman, you're not aware of any applications or approvals for variance relief in connection with the lot coverage in excess of 5%, correct?
Correct, I'm not aware of any.
And do you do any independent investigation to determine what the zoning was at the time when the driveway was constructed?
I did not.
And with regard to the drywall, the 3 drywall system that you're proposing on the plan, Steve, that is not intended to capture any of the coverage up to the 5 and including the 5.9%, correct?
Just the tennis court.
Just the tennis court. So the tennis court is at anything over 5.9% to the 7.3%.
That's correct.
Right? And in terms of right now, with regard to the house, where does the house drain to? Is there any drywall or infiltration system associated with the roof of the house?
I don't know.
And other than the inlet and the existing drain inlet that you identify on the plan, are there any other inlets that you're aware of on the property?
I can't really speak to the entire property. We just looked in the area, the project area, which is the area, north of the driveway and in the tennis court area. No other drain inlets in those areas.
And on your plan, Steve, you say approximate location, I guess a 6-inch drain pipe?
Correct.
Okay. The fact that it says approximate, you weren't able to identify precisely where that pipe is located?
Well, we kind of located the trench that was above that pipe. We can see that pretty clearly. So we're assuming that's it. It didn't, we didn't see it put in, so we don't know exactly where it was, but very confident that what we've located is where that pipe is.
And how do you know it's a 6-inch drain pipe?
Well, we saw that on the outlet. The outlet is visible and you could measure it there.
And as you're getting towards Rattlesnake Bridge Road, it looks like that your approximate location of 6-inch drain pipe sort of just, it's my words, fall away a little bit, right?
You mean the pipe just ends?
Yeah, it just ends, right?
Yes, correct.
Right, and there's no inlet at that location, correct?
That's correct.
And with regard to the your recommendation to Mr. Goldman with regard to minimizing the impervious coverage. Where were the areas on the property that you were focusing on?
Just gonna check to the question, I don't think that was the testimony, but answer the questions.
I think you have to answer, it was part of the discussion.
Bless you.
Thank you. Well, the comment was brought up in Mr. Banish's letter about the driveway. So we just talked about, perhaps there was to reduce some of the driveway area. And that's when Mr. Goldman indicated that he didn't think there was because of the way that the way that he uses the driveway and the way that it functions for him and the way that they use it. He didn't feel he could reduce that anyway.
Bless you. Did the ordinance for the R10 zone doesn't require this doubling of the driveway, right? And where is and I apologize, Steve, if you mentioned it in the direct, I don't think I caught it. Where's the actual garage for this property?
It's the wall that faces Rattlesnake Bridge Road. The wall that faces Rattlesnake Bridge Road.
Bless you. And what is the area and dimensions, if you can approximate for me, of that macadam that's immediately in front of that garage?
So the pavement extends about 38 feet away from the garage.
38 feet?
Correct.
And how wide is it?
Well, it's the width of the garage, which, and I'm just gonna scale that on the drawing. So it's about 34 feet.
So 38 times 34 is that area.
Correct.
Thank you. And the garage, how many cars can fit in that garage?
3-car garage. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's the width of a 3-car garage. But it may only be 2 doors, I'm not sure.
And so the upper loop doesn't go to any driveway, or I'm sorry, any garage area.
No, that's just for the guests and others who come to the house, deliveries and that kind of thing.
And do you know whether back in 2015 or even to this date, there's any consideration of utilizing porous pavement or another form of pervious surface on part of the driveway? You're not aware of any consideration?
I'm not aware.
And you would agree that pavement versus gravel driveways have different runoff characteristics, correct?
Slightly different, but
And when you say they're different, in what sense? In other words?
according to the engineering calculations, there's more runoff from a paved driveway than gravel driveway. Slightly different.
And when you mentioned on your plan that the tennis court is 7,200 square feet, is that just the rectangular box that you're showing on the plan?
That's correct.
And so that doesn't include the dry well system that's on your plan, right?
No, because the dry wells are buried underground, so they have grass on top.
Right, so but when they're filled, when they're functioning and they're filled with water, do you consider those pervious or impervious?
They're considered pervious because there's grass on top.
Even if they're filled with water?
Yes.
In the storm?
Yeah.
And is there any consideration given, notwithstanding your testimony about how the property slopes away to the south in that area, of shifting the tennis court, I'll call it the tennis court development, a little bit further to the south? Is that possible?
Well, I mean, it's certainly possible. I think, Mr. Goldman chose this location for several reasons. It functions best for him, doesn't have a significant impact on any of the existing trees that are out there. In fact, it minimizes the disturbance to any of the trees out there. And it's in the location that provides the greatest buffer to all the neighbors that surround it. So I'm sure Mr. Goldman considered many different options for that, but chose this one as the best for all those reasons.
And with regard, you just mentioned the trees, so there's gonna be at least one tree that needs to be removed, correct, with the ash tree or so?
Correct, yes.
You also show other trees on the plan, Steve, and you don't identify the species of those trees that are within the area or right outside the area of disturbance. What type of trees are those?
I don't know.
And have you done any investigation as to whether those trees that are not marked to be removed but are within the area of disturbance, in fact, will need to be removed because they're not going to be able to survive the construction activity?
I think we showed 2 trees in the area of disturbance to be removed. There's one right on the edge that won't be, need to be removed. So there's 2 trees out there, and I believe one of them was the ash tree that was referred to. The other one, I don't know what kind it is.
And you're confident that the other trees that are either within or just outside the area of disturbance are going to be able to survive given their root systems and the impact of those root systems?
Yes.
And there was a comment, I think it was probably from Paul or I think it was Paul, not Frank, about the sewer pipe. About whether that's going to be impacted by the construction activities.
I think you're referring to the connecting line between the septic tank and the septic field.
Yeah.
There will be no impact. I think the concern was just maybe during construction, if there's heavy equipment driving over that area, it just needs to be protected so it doesn't get broken.
And there's a reference on your plan to soil decompaction testing in the area of the tennis court, correct?
Correct. That's a soil erosion and sediment control requirement from the Soil Conservation District.
Right. And do you know the water table level at the area where the dry wells are going to be installed?
No, I don't.
Do you know the water table level in the area where the drain pipe and the drain inlets or the drain inlet is identified?
No, I don't.
And if the soil decompaction testing requires more dry wells or larger dry wells, how does that impact the plan?
Well, that's as the soil decompaction testing area has really nothing to do with the dry well calculations or requirements. That's a requirement for the Soil Conservation District about the final grading that occurs out there. So it really has no impact at all on the dry wells.
Mm-hmm. But if you, but you haven't done any type of water runoff calculations as part of this application, correct?
Well, no, we did the runoff calculations. That's how we determined the 3 dry wells are required.
Okay, but if the water table is not what you anticipate, then what happens? Do you just put an additional dry well or change the size of it?
There's several different options. We could, redirect them to a different area. We can change the design and make a shallower system. So there's several different options if that in fact turns out to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Have you been at the property? You said you're at the property, Steve. Have you been at the property during any rainstorm when you could observe, water going through the swell that you described, or water going into the inlet that you described?
No, the day that we met with your client's engineer on the site was the day after a night of heavy rain. And so the site was pretty dry, it was well drained. There was no standing or ponding water anywhere or evidence of siltation or erosion on either the properties north or Mr. Goldman's property.
Right. You remember though, Steve, that during that site visit, my client, that was described to you that my clients are experiencing, severe, which they'll tell you about later, severe water problems over the years with regard to the property once that driveway was changed.
Note the objection to Mr. Simon testifying.
Well, he's talking about the site visit. Do you recall being informed of that concern?
It's legitimate, Cross. Please continue.
We did hear that, but we asked for evidence of that, and there was none that we saw. We were not presented with any evidence that there was any problems or a history of problems out there.
And Mr. Goldman talked about this Prisco irrigation and this, the installation of the inlet and the pipe. Did you see any plans or permits associated with that?
I didn't see any plans.
Right, and you weren't asked to opine or review any plans or applications associated with that installation, right?
That was installed before we were involved in the project.
And just there's no clean outs. I think we could all ask you that question, right?
Well, I didn't see any. We didn't see any.
You talked about the dry well and maintenance of the dry well, Steve. How does it, my experience, usually you need a truck to go back there, right, to clean out those dry wells?
No, not always. The first step, of course, is the inspection, and that's, there's manhole lids on top that allow for access and observation through there. There's different ways that can be done. It can be done by hand. It can be done, with some kind of a vacuum truck, I imagine, as well. But it's not required to have a truck do that.
Okay, so you think that you don't need a truck to get back there and adequately clean those out?
No, I don't think so.
And with regard to the inlet and the drain pipe, do you know how often those get maintained?
I don't, I'm unaware of that. I don't know that there's a maintenance requirement for that.
So you're not aware of any type of maintenance manual of any sort with regard to any drainage system on this property, right?
I'm not aware of it, but there's not a need for those. Maintenance manuals typically are required for a drainage pipe like that.
And with regard to, and you weren't involved with any type of construction of swale.
Correct.
Questions? Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, one question. There's a couple boxes that you don't refer to in your impervious calculations. Is that because those are like dispensing for gardens or something?
Boxes.
Yeah, so in other words, like right by the fence in the rear.
Yeah, yes, correct. They're not, that's not impervious, it's, garden or something.
And, and there was one other question with regard to the landscape, I guess I'm gonna be asking the landscape architect about this. Given the clay and the shale that is at this property, what would you recommend would be an appropriate installation for landscaping so to ensure as an engineer, the viability of those plantings and trees, including their ability to adequately absorb water?
I'm going to defer that. That's probably the best question for Mr. Henderson, who's the landscape architect.
Okay, but as an engineer, given your knowledge of the clay and the shale conditions of the property, do you have any opinion on that?
I would say probably some kind of native, trees would be the best.
And what about how to install them, given the lack of soil there?
I don't know that they would require any special attention. There's a lot of trees and landscaping around Mr. Goldman's house. There's a lot of native trees that are growing on the property without any problems or issues. So I think my recommendation would be some kind of a native tree that would seem to do well in that area because they already are.
And then finally, so you've performed, nor are you aware of any testing, stormwater testing in relation to the inlet, the drain pipe, or the swale, correct?
That was installed before I was involved in the project.
But you haven't done any testing since then to confirm whether it works and how it works and whether it's adequate to address water runoff issues.
Well, the drain works. The drain that was installed works. There's no ponding or evidence of ponding in that area. And I was out there, like I said, after a substantial rain event, and there was, the grass was not matted down, it wasn't water laying there, we saw no standing water anywhere within that area, so it definitely works.
You don't know to what capacity the roadside storm has.
All I can say is it works. When I was there, I observed that it worked.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Parker?
Just a quick clarification on that last issue, Mr. Parker, based upon your physical observations and calculations that you did on site. Are you confident that the drainage that was installed addresses that 0.9% overage in terms of the lot coverage?
Well, the drainage system, it directs the runoff from that area up toward Rattlesnake Bridge Road. It doesn't work like a dry well system where it allows for infiltration back into the ground. It just channels it, moves it somewhere else. So yeah, it works in that regard. It works great.
And based on your physical observations, when you actually went to the site, did you see any indication that there was a stormwater runoff issue related to that additional 0.9%?
Saw no evidence of that.
And you were physically located on the neighbor's property to the north?
Yes, both the neighbor's property to the north and the subject property as well.
And did you walk the entire area that was pointed out to you as the area of concern?
Yeah, we did.
And again, this was after a significant rainstorm the night before?
Yes.
And no evidence in your opinion. When you say no evidence, what were you looking for?
Again, if there is a problem with severe runoff, you see erosion, you see an erosion area, you see that if there's a washout from the wooded area, it's easy to see if there's sticks or leaves that get carried out. There's maybe a siltation area where the silt is carried off and deposited in another area. We didn't see any of that.
Mr. Simon also was asking you about the looped driveway system. When you did your site visit, did you actually enter from the neighbor's property to the north?
Yes, we did.
Do you recall the driveway configuration of the neighbor's property to the north?
They have a similar driveway configuration in that they have a driveway that goes up to the garage of the property and then a separate driveway that goes into a loop in front of the home.
Similar driveway configuration to the subject property?
Yes.
I have another question.
Just a quick follow-up, so Mr. Parker, of the 7.53% lot coverage, as proposed by this application, only 1.6% is being captured, correct?
I don't know what the number is, but it's the number, it's whatever's coming off the text book, the new.
So 1.6% of 7.53% is being addressed by this application, correct?
I can't believe that.
I'm not,
Because it's not 1% or 7%, because that's
No,
0.7. You said 1%
No,
of 7%.
the existing, I said of 7.53%, only 1.6% is being captured.
You're phrasing it correctly again.
I don't think, I know why you think
I know you are.
Yeah, well. I don't think I am.
I believe you want to say is 1.6% of the lot coverage being collected. That's correct.
Correct.
That's not 1.6%.
1.6% of the lot coverage is being collected of the 7.5.
And that's phrasing it correct.
Correct. What?
I happen to be in that.
I happen to not be. Thank you. Thank you.
If I could just follow up real quickly.
by the way, he's not a rock and roll star, just in case you're there.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker, Mr. Ferraro had mentioned the possibility of an inlet along, additional inlets along the, that existing drainage system. Is that something that could be done and that the applicant would agree to?
Yes, it is. I think Mr. Ferrer described, adding some additional inlets like the one that's there along that path. Mostly in the area, adjacent to the easterly loop of the driveway, but certainly the exact location we can work out with Mr. Ferrero. But yeah, adding a couple of those would be pretty easy.
And just to be clear, based upon your observation testimony, you're not aware, you don't believe there is any runoff issue in that area. How the applicant would be agreeable to installing those additional.
That's correct, yes.
Anything from Mr. Parker?
Do you know where Mr. Prisco's pipe stops?
Yeah, it's shown on the plan. So we're, near the front where it says invert or INV 109.7, it points to the end of the pipe.
Do you, maybe this is a question for Mr. Goldman. Do you know why they decided to stop it there instead of running it all the way out to Rattlesnake?
I think it's just, there's a low spot right there, natural point to end it, and they just stop it right there.
Anything else? No? Okay. We do like to stop at 10 o'clock, so no new witnesses after 10. Okay.
It's, Henry, interesting.
Raise your right hand. You swear from to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God.
I do.
Please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Henry Hinterstein, HINTERSTEIN, 45 Moss Avenue, Westville, New Jersey.
Henry and Mr. Robertson, I don't believe Henry has ever been qualified before this board's qualifications.
Mr. Hinterstein, if you could provide this board with your background, training, experience, education in the field of professional planning.
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from Rutgers University in Environmental Planning and Design. I'm a licensed professional planner and a licensed landscape architect. I've been a licensed professional planner for 18 years. I've also been a licensed landscape architect for 30 years. I've testified in numerous boards throughout the state of New Jersey as a professional planner, as an expert in landscaping. I worked on the other side as Mr. Banish, both on the planning and landscape architecture side for Piscataway Township since 1991. It's funny because I probably built about or redone 30 tennis courts in my time with the town. So I'm sort of an expert on tennis courts as well.
I would offer Mr. Hinterstein as an expert in field professional planning and also as an expert in the area of landscape architecture.
I have no questions, Robert. Any questions?
In terms of his qualifications.
So, Chairman, we will accept this
Yes.
qualification,
Mhm.
professional planner and certified landscape architect.
Mr. Hinterstein, you're obviously familiar with subject applications, is that correct?
Correct.
And in connection with the application, have you formed an opinion with regard to the variance that is requested in this application?
I have, again, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I think we've heard enough description about the property. Again, the proposal for the new standard size tennis court, which is 7,200 square feet, results in that coverage variance going from the existing 5.9% to 7.43. The C variance, I think, can be granted under the flexible C2 criteria. The benefits outweighing the detriments. I think that the variance can be granted because it supports purposes of the municipal land use law. And I think the deviation, the benefits outweigh any detrimental impacts, substantial detriments that this court would cause. And I don't have any impact on purposes. So again, the criteria under the C2, this property is a large 10-acre estate-size piece of property. The residential use and associated uses, accessory uses of the pool, the tennis court, are all allowed uses in the zone. Tennis court enhances this single family home within the zone and will, in my opinion, actually increase the property values of the surrounding homes as well as help with the tax revenue to the town. I believe the court's going to provide a social and recreation component to the family who are avid tennis players. Then the court was strategically located in the rear of the property to have the least visual and ecological impact. Noting that this zone, I think, is intended to help preserve the natural environment as one of its goals. Again, the strategic location of this court, only having to take down one dead ash tree. I believe the other tree that was noted on that plan had actually fallen down already. So I believe that the court is located in such a fashion where it take advantage of all the existing mature trees and woods that you could see from the aerial photographs that were provided under the testimony. The court's located approximately 200 feet away from the northern property line, 60 feet away from the easterly property line, and visually buffered by existing tree wooded areas around the property, as I discussed. Again, the applicant is amenable to adding additional evergreen landscaping from conifers. I personally feel that the existing buffer, as you can see from the pictures, was more than adequate for this board, but again, in the spirit of trying to make sure that it is, the applicant is amenable to adding, I think, some evergreen, whether it be some holly trees, some spruce trees, some material that'll be dense in the wintertime. Again, a lot of vegetation out here, not all of it, but a lot of it is deciduous in nature, which means in the fall, late fall, winter, we may have a little bit more of filtered views through the trees. So I think additional evergreen conifers along the northerly easterly property line would be a benefit, just in case some of that deciduous material does allow for some filtered views in the winter time. Again, the 7,200 square feet is 1.63% more than currently exists on the lot today. And I think it could be looked at as a minimal increase when considering the overall size of this property of 441,000 square feet plus, which is 10 acres. The overall impervious coverage of this lot is directly related, I think, to the home location as was discussed, how far it's set back, and the driveway that exists on the property that I think safely circulate and traverse the property. Again, we have a separate driveway facing the garage area facing the front. The home faces to the north, and I think the separation was done for, I think, safety purposes more than anything. As testified by Mr. Barker, I think the drywall system is going to be installed to compensate for all associated increase in impervious coverage relating to the court and the runoff associated with that court. It's all going to be directed into this drywall system. And again, the fencing and lighting that's going to be proposed, we'll adhere to all township ordinances. I know there was some discussion about 15-foot high fencing. Somebody who's built numerous tennis courts, the average height of a tennis court fence is actually 10 feet. There are some cases where I've seen 12, but again, the standard is 10 feet, usually 1 3/4 inch mesh to prevent balls from passing through them. The norm nowadays is black vinyl coat or black powder coat with chain link fence system. The reason for that is it blends in much better with the natural environment in the landscape. It almost becomes invisible. And along with those reasonings, and I feel that this application promotes several purposes and goals of the municipal land use law, including A, E, G, and M. I'll try to go over those quickly, just so that they're on the record. A is to encourage municipal action and guide the appropriate use and development of lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. E is to promote and establish appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses and open space, both public and private, according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And then to encourage the coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with the view of lessening the cost of such development and the more efficient use of lands. Again, as far as the negative criteria, which is a requirement and justifying the C2 variance.
Could we, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
You're on a roll and I always hate to do
No
that.
problem.
I think for the board's edification, when you identified those specific, and you didn't identify words in each of those purposes, link that to what about this proposal is meeting that objective, if you could do that for us.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, again, A, which is to encourage mutual action, appropriate development of all lands. Again, if this tennis court wasn't put on his property, he would have to search for another location. Again, it sort of creates more development, and I think that the court sort of does promote public health, safety, and general welfare. It may be solely the general welfare of this particular applicant, but it also prevents him from having to go on the road, travel to a tennis center, and create more traffic and all of the things that come with having to leave your home and go to another location. So as minimal as it is, I think it promotes that. As far as the appropriate population densities and concentrations contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, and communities. Obviously, this is going to contribute to the well-being of the Goldman residents and his neighborhood, in the sense that it will probably provide additional tax revenue and increase the values of the homes in the area. G, to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, commercial, industrial, and open space, both public and private, in accordance to the respective environmental requirements or needs of all New Jersey citizens. I think that's really self-explanatory. This court does that for the Goldmans. They are New Jersey citizens, and it is a private home, but again, I still think it applies. And again, shaping land development with the view of lessening the cost of such development to the more efficient land use. Again, this is already on his property. Having this court here, I think is an efficient use of his land, and having to go elsewhere. As far as the negative criteria, I believe there will be no substantial detriment as a result of the proposed application. Again, the court was strategically located for minimizing the environmental impact. You can't see it from the road. You can't see it from any of the adjacent properties. There's a substantial buffer that exists. I believe that the coverage variance, although 7.53, I still think is homeowners with existing development and uses in the area and will enhance the recreation use of this large estate property. Familiar with one coverage use or coverage case of maybe last year here that allowed for 9% coverage for pool and tennis court. Very similar to this case, state size driveway, again, pool and patio, and that coverage was similar size property was over 9%. So I believe this is still in character with these larger estate size homes in the area. The coverage deviation, I think, is something that's discernible to the naked eye. It's minimal. I think we're looking at the overall size of this property of over 441,000 square feet. And the additional runoff resulting from the court will also be collected directly into the drywall system, preventing it of any new runoff impacts by this tennis court. And when looking at the possible impairment to the zone plan, the master plan, I don't see any impairment that would result from this application. Again, the tennis court itself is a permitted use in the zone, is an accessory use. Coverage deviation exists. And I think it's minimal at best. And for those reasons, I think this application granted under there.
Mr. Hinterstein, just two quick questions. In terms of the additional landscaping, can you describe for the board where that additional, specifically where that additional landscaping would be proposed?
Yeah, it would be proposed, probably, there would be probably a couple of evergreen conifers proposed on the wrapping around to the east side of the property, but really concentrating it on the north side of the property. And probably wrapping one or two around, sort of down to the north west side of the property.
Could you maybe go up and point to that on the?
Put it up now. Fortunately, we're challenged, and so the area is being right over here, and it would wrap around that 60-foot. The court's 60 by 120, so the 60-foot area is the area of concern, and wrapping around slightly over here. And this area over here is the area that conifers. Yeah, that court's only 60 feet wide. And we say, well, 60 feet is quite a bit, but when you plant an evergreen conifer, the conifer is going to grow to probably be 15 to 20 foot in diameter. So I would probably say that 4 to 5 evergreen conifers wrapping around that northern side will provide a side. At some point, again, we don't want to overplant so that the trees are just dying down the line. But I think if you get the trees in ample amount of room, usually 15-foot centering, 12 to 15-foot centering, the trees are going to thrive and they're going to provide a nice buffer to that property to the north. Even though I think it may be in excess due to the fact that the existing vegetation that exists around this entire property, in my opinion, more abundant to buffer this tennis court.
Just one follow-up. You mentioned you had done some research. There was a similar coverage issue recently. Was that the property on Copper Lake Road?
Yes, it was. It was 2021.
And was that was also in the R10 rural residential district?
Yes, I believe it is.
And that was to exceed the lot coverage by how much?
The coverage variance was for 9 points. I could look it up. I think I have it here, but it was, I believe, for 9.4. It might have been pared back a smidge to 9.3. I don't have the resolution directly in front of me, but I believe it may have been pared back a small amount, but I believe it was still over 9%.
And that was an application for a tennis court as well.
Pool and patio, correct, but tennis court.
There was that a C2 variance request as well?
C2 variance request, and also justified as flexible C2 criteria.
And there were findings from the board with regard to the positive, negative criteria in that case?
Yes.
Was there a finding that the benefits in that case substantially outweigh the detriments?
Yes.
Could we assume for the sake of argument that there is not a precedential value to that prior case you referred to?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, are you suggesting to the board that because the variance was granted for 9%
No,
coverage?
I think I know what you're getting at. No, all I'm saying is that I believe I brought that up, talking about the character of the neighborhood, the area, and being in harmony with, I think, other properties in the township that have similar features and coverages.
Thank you.
But this is its own case.
Yes, that was the point.
Okay. Anyone here on the board have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question regarding response perhaps to Banish memo. And maybe Frank, you can also jump in on this. This on the paragraph or the comment 2.3. The configuration of the driveway creates two separate pathways to the home, a redundancy that essentially doubles the driveway coverage on the property. Additionally, there are overwide pavement areas like the one seen at right that increase coverage from the existing pavement. So, I mean, Frank throws the issue out there in his planning letter. Do you have a response to that? That, you know, and putting the drainage off to the side.
Right, putting the
Because
drainage, right.
I think it belongs off to the side. Looking straight at the requested variance on lot coverage, Frank is essentially saying you've got redundancy in the driveways. You have an overwide pavement area. I think the next step is applicant, you could look at reducing that pavement into conformance or less of a variance.
Again, I was at the site, I drove the driveway, and as you can see from these pictures, the majority of the driveway that I witnessed is approximately 10 feet, 11 feet in width, it's barely enough for one car. So I believe the looping or what was called redundancy, I think is because I think a lot of it acts as a one-way for safety reasons. People that come in, they don't have to back out, they drive, they can park along and then continue on around the loop and continue out. So the guests would do that. Family members perhaps using the garage area would have their separate sort of one lane. And I think it really widens out to closer to the 2-car width when you got closer to the road. So could you take, again, I'm not an engineer, but in my opinion, you sort of take out portions of that single lane driveway the way it's laid out now without completely obliterating this layout. I think what would end up happening is that you have cars going down and then nowhere to go. They would have to make K-turns on lawns, they would have to back out of long stretches of one-way driveway. So you may take out a portion of the loop, but I think then you would have to compensate that with either making some of this driveway area wider and providing turnaround areas for cars to then turn around. And again, it's just not, I think, something that Mr. Goldman thinks would be attractive. I think this is much more, I think, of an aesthetically, coming from the landscape architecture side of this, I just feel this is a much more aesthetically pleasing scenario, and I think, what do you call it, result? I just think it's a much more aesthetically pleasing design to have the driveway is almost hidden by these islands of vegetation. The center, the driveway sort of disappears around them. And again, I think it's more aesthetics and safety.
Frank, and I don't mean to extrapolate from your comment, but I mean, if you can, at least for my edification, am I getting the gist of your comment?
You hit the nail on the head, Larry. I think the question was really, and I fully appreciate the estate character of the property, the landscape elements that create that character. If this driveway came in and did all of this stuff and got you into the garage, this portion of the driveway would be superfluous. That was really the point, was if you want to get back coverage, there seems to be a place to get it without compromising adequate access to the dwelling. Not as convenient for sure as having the ability to loop around these things. So I think part of the trouble that we have here is, and the planner did rightly suggest that the purpose G that refers to sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including recreational uses for public and private purposes. Okay, that puts us squarely in this arena. But the other purposes, generally, he was talking about the benefit to the owner, not the benefit to the public that would come through the purposes of the statute. So you have to, I guess, make up your mind if the convenience and benefit to the owner is somehow the kind of thing that weighs heavily in that equation. And I'm not trying to sum up for you, because really that's for these people to do and you all to decide.
Do we know exactly how many square feet would be removed by this loop there, Mr. Parker?
How many square feet would you
Remove, if we took the right side of the driveway, I mean, how much are we really eliminating in impervious coverage?
I think it's about 2,000 square feet.
2,000.
It's about half the existing owner.
But you'd also have to widen the other.
No, you absolutely not. And I didn't say it, but you asked. There's nothing to say that somebody coming up this driveway will either go right or left.
there's no traffic control signage here. So if somebody goes up to the right, and somebody happens to be coming down the same loop from the other way, you have the same problem as if you've got the driveway on the left. So it's really an argument in my mind that unless you have one way, do not enter, and all these other kinds of traffic control signs out there, really that argument doesn't hold water. And there are plenty of places in town, plenty of residences with driveways that are longer than this, that don't have double driveways. So, you know, I understand the convenience, but please don't tell me it's safe.
But it would become a one-way.
No, it become like a regular driveway.
Like everyone else's driveway.
It would become like 95% of the driveways in town.
Which square footage did we say?
I'm just guessing
Guessing,
using my
yeah.
thumb as an inch, it's about 2,000 square feet.
Maybe gain a third of the
Maybe
tennis
three.
court back, basically.
How wide is the driveway? 11 feet?
I'm guessing it's about 10. 200 feet, about 10.
Anything else for the planner?
So we're eliminating the incremental 1.63. Well, that 0.9. We cut that in half. I was looking at the 0.9 and the 5.9. And that's a little under 4,000 square feet. So this is about half of that existing. So it would mitigate the lot coverage.
I have a question for the landscape architect. Since you are a landscape architect and you probably know a lot about topography and all that, what is your position on the left side, you know, the north side of the property in terms of water that may or may not be running off to the neighbor's yard?
I think the grades speak for themselves. I find it very hard to imagine that one runoff from this driveway is traversing all the way across this property onto the neighbor's property. When there's a swale there, and a system, a drainage system that was put in there to capture a good portion of that land. That's my opinion based on just the topography and the testimony and opinions of Mr. Parker, but I deal a lot in topography, and I just, if you showed me those topo lines all running to the north, I would say, you know, perhaps, but I just find it very unlikely that that driveway runoff is making it all the way across there when the topo lines are all parallel with rattlesnake.
So I have a follow-up question, maybe for Mr. Parker. The you know, the north side of that driveway edge is approximately how far from the property line?
So the proposed point, the perpendicular, it's about 110 feet.
So the edge of the driveway, the closest point is 110 feet from the property line.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for our attorney. What are we here for? I mean, are we talking about the tennis court or are we talking about a pre-existing drainage issue? I'm confused. I don't know what we're talking about the left side of the property, the driveway. It seems that maybe this paved driveway is causing an issue, but we're not here to discuss whether that's the issue or not. Are we just looking for the variance for the tennis court?
You can grant the variance based on your own determinations. You should hear all the testimony first, but, you know, this is an increase, but there's no prior variance approval to go to 5.9% that we know of. So in my view, you're sort of hearing the entirety of the deviation from 5 to 7.54, whatever the number is. On the other hand, the fact that it's been there for 6 years or something like that, and the fact that the gravel was there for 36 years, is it, or 38 years, might help you make a determination on that.
But we don't know if it's even been there prior to when everything changed.
That's right. Well, we haven't heard the proof that it was.
Okay.
And I don't want, we'll short circuit this a little bit. It's probable that Mr. Simon will tell you that lots over 10 acres in the R3 zone were limited to 5%. I don't think this matters because frankly, I think you all know that basically what happens is people build driveways and parking lots and pools and things like that, patios, and they don't realize that they're going over 5% or that are going over whatever the percentages are in any zone. So you don't necessarily assume that something is grandfathered. You don't necessarily assume that variance has been granted. If you get those proofs, you hear it. But in a setting like this, you're deciding whether this variance to deviate from 5%, with all of the history, should be granted. And in that setting, you make determinations of whether you could give ideas and conditions that might reduce the amount of deviation from the ordinance. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying that there's anything justifying that here or it's not necessitating here, but the point I'm making is it's all within your discretion. And you decide by majority vote whether to grant the deviation from the ordinance. It's not Paul, it's not me, it's not Mr. Simon, it's not Mr. Robertson, it's you.
But
And
it's
so-
for the tennis court.
But it's for,
It's for the.
No,
tennis
it
court.
really is for impervious. And funny thing is, the tennis court is totally permitted. Everything about what's being proposed is permitted as a use. The issue is only whether the impervious coverage should be increased from the ordinance standard of 5% to 7.54%.
But we're not going back.
I don't
and
know what
saying-
you,
We're not going back and looking at.
you can if you
at
want to.
Pre-existing.
You can if you want to, because we don't have any proof so far, and I'll wait it, but we don't have any proof that there was a prior approval of deviating from any ordinance standard at all. Okay? That doesn't, in other words, it's best to look at it as a little bit of a blank slate, not negative against the applicant, not positive for the applicant. It's called tabula rasa. We should do that here because we do not actually have evidence yet. And the applicant would have presented that to us, I think, if we had it, and the planner would have researched it and found it, that there was a prior approval to go to 5.9%. I have my doubts that there was, but I don't penalize people for that because, and frankly, everybody puts impervious surface on their single family houses lots without getting any approval from anyone. Because you don't need approval to widen your driveway or to put in a patio or to put in bluestone or to put in a walkway. You don't go for a building permit. You don't go for a grading permit. You really, most towns don't even have the authority to actually require that. And we don't. And so neither benefit nor detriment is a way to look at this. But that doesn't mean you can't grant it. Okay.
Can I ask you a question? It's not as if this is an unimproved lot and we're planning on putting a house, a parking lot, or anything in between on this property with 7.5 lot coverage. We're talking about an existing house and with an existing set of coverage and incrementally adding to it. And they're looking for relief to incrementally add that. I think what we're,
I'm telling you.
what
I'm telling you-
we're laboring with on either sides of this table, what we're laboring with is, can it be, should it be, were opportunities to mitigate that expansion considered? And is that valid? Is that the basis of our, ultimately, is that the basis of our evaluation? Now, I can't, and I won't go back 38 years to figure out whether it was approved or not approved. All I'm talking about is they're looking for an additional 1.63.
That's all
And are
within
we-
your, you're not limited. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Those are appropriate inquiry, all the questions you've asked tonight. Maybe there were a few that were on the edge. I'm not gonna name them. All of them were relevant. And I'm just saying to you, you make a
But
call.
it's not a whole new development, is my point.
That's a point you have. Someone else may have a different point. I'm not gonna control the points. You control the decision, and all of that can be taken into consideration in your decision, okay? And one of, in relationship to that is, there's an existing condition. And the existing condition has apparently existed at least since 2015, right? Maybe since 1984. for at least the gravel driveway. Okay.
And whether this tennis court goes in or not, it's not gonna change anything going on with this property in regard to drainage.
It's changing it, it's changing it by the tennis court itself.
In that area, but nothing exists, right?
That's right.
It's gonna have no effect.
You're gonna deal with that, and that's, I don't know what the arguments are gonna be on that. But it sounds like the logical response.
Wait to hear that.
Okay, anything more for this witness? I don't think
Do you have
anything's
a
changed in the
landscape
public.
Or no?
I do not have one, but again, you would see about 5 staggered circles on the left-hand side of that tennis court. They would probably be spruce species, holly species, things that would be native, beer resistant, and can, handle the conditions on the property.
At some point in the process, you would produce that
Of
for
course,
us.
yeah, I'll work, more than happy to work with a professional.
Okay. Yes,
I
sir.
don't know,
Yeah, we have public, we have.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask. I know it's about 10 o'clock.
It is.
I can do one of two things, especially given the last comment that we haven't seen a landscape plan, which I'd be sort of curious about. Madam Chair, do you want me to cross-examine now, or do you want me to wait till the next meeting? Because obviously we have witnesses.
You do have witnesses, I know you do, yeah. What do you think, guys? You ready to cut for tonight?
And frankly, if I can speak parenthetically, that maybe if the applicant is going to be amending the plan consistent with the representations and testimony so far,
Mhm.
that may obviate a whole bunch of questions.
It might, it might. So I think it's time to quit for tonight. Do you all agree or? Yes, okay, we will continue. We have a date we can give them?
No, first.
So 6 is tonight.
December 1st is the Thursday.
He's napping.
December 1st is the first day.
Okay, is that good for you? Okay, it's good, yes, okay,
So
okay, so we'll carry you.
good for you, Mr. Robertson. So the application will be, of the Goldmans will be carried without additional notices to December 1st, 2022 at 7 PM, and also here and also, I think, still hybrid.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good night. Yeah, okay. So next week we have Lang Fahey. You do? Okay, all right. So we need a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're adjourned. We're adjourned.
Motion adjourned.
Did we miss comments earlier?
Oh, yes, you did. I thought you were leaving, but, okay, we'll bring,
Okay, just to let everyone know, an alert went out today, advising Bedminster businesses, particularly in the DN neighborhoods, and property owners, that, the special use permit, the township-wide special use permit that the township committee, adopted in 2020 and renewed in 2021 is expiring at the end of the month. That special use permit was giving leniency on outdoor signs and displays. Township committee has elected not to renew that special use permit. So Susanna Karas, who is our zoning officer, got the word out that the Bedminster sign ordinance and the sign requirements that are in our ordinance will be enforced.
okay.
Just to let everyone know that the signs that proliferated during COVID will be the subject of zoning activities coming up. So,
Does that include all the lawn signs that are in different places around the town, in the neighborhoods?
other than the Colin Hickey signs, yes.
No, I mean, other than the political signs.
Not even right.
Well, then they should be up. Colin.
That's all.
13 months, come on.
Other than the political signs, the business signs and promotional signs and other kinds. Because I did see that there's been a lot of them.
There's been a lot
Yes,
of them,
right.
the feather flags, the banners.
I just like to make one suggestion, that if someone comes in for just a sign, that we have an application just for that, not have to go with a survey and all the details that go with that, if it's just for the sign, because I understand there's going to be some people that do not comply and are going to have to come in for a sign only.
Who establishes those requirements?
Well, it's part of the checklist, the board can waive whatever they want, but I would say that there needs to be certain basic information as far as the survey is concerned as to where the sign is going to be.
Well, okay, but keep it limited so it's not a big expense and a big overhaul for, someone that's just coming in for a sign. That's
Yeah,
just my
especially if it's a
suggestion.
temporary sign.
Well, I
Because
wasn't
the
even,
temporary sign,
yeah, right, well, I wasn't even thinking about temporary, I was thinking about
You
permanent.
don't get a temporary variance.
No, not a temporary
You're
variance.
getting a variance, it's not a temporary sign.
What do you get for temporary sign?
Your temporary sign stands.
Right, we got it.
And that,
But that either goes.
That doesn't come to the
That either
board.
complies.
Yeah,
you get-
right.
You get a permit.
Right.
On that side of the building, or you come here.
But when you place a new sign on land, just so you appreciate this, that's a site plan. Commercial, it's a site plan. It's on a single family house, Collins, that's not a site plan. But commercial sign anywhere placed on land, not on the building, is a site plan. Has to come to the planning board as a site plan. The thing that can be waived is the degree of site plan information required.
Well, that's what I'm,
And that's doable. And, if it's a variance, it's a notice case.
oh, yeah, if it's a variance, yes. But I understand there are going to be people that are going to be coming in because their current signs do not comply.
Correct.
So I think if we can just limit it as much as we can, and you're right, I mean, if you're going to have
Right,
a
if you
place for
wanna
a
have-
site plan,
If you want to have two feather flags or whatever they're called.
Well, they're
right,
temporary,
and a sign
right?
Permit only allows you to have one. And you want two, then you're coming here.
Oh, yeah, that's a variance,
Those are all
yeah.
supposed to be temporary anyway.
And that's
Yeah.
where you said, right,
Yeah, they're temporary.
They're standing.
And then you
Somebody
get to a
really
comment I
wants
know
to
that
know.
Rich made a few years ago. Rich, I'm giving some more here. That you get the quick check, right? So is it one per business or is it one per property? What do you get with the sign permit?
I'd have to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I have a,
I think that's
If I
where
have
a
a
lot of
20-foot storefront,
discrepancy comes up.
Yeah.
and if
with
somebody else
that.
has a 60-foot storefront, they get the same thing?
Yes.
Yes.
No. Yes.
Okay, I just need, some thought needs to be put into it, that's all.
And the other thing is, if somebody wants permanent outdoor dining, we don't allow that in any zones. If we do, then it's a site plan. If it's permanent outdoor dining, it's not allowed in the zone. That's some sort of variance. If it's accessory, it might be a C variance. So people could ask for that, and if they had appropriate location, they could get permanent approval.
And we did that with Pluckman Inn.
Yeah.
And we have not done it with Delicious Heights.
Mhm.
Well, they've not come for us.
Yeah.
But, certainly the word is out that, whatever the prior indication that Bedminster did not support outside dining, hopefully that's been removed and the indications that Bedminster does support outdoor dining. Just, you either do it under special use permit or the town does it for you by doing what we did before by proposing and implementing the town wide, or they come forward.
Mhm.
get site plan approval.
Mhm. All right.
Chairperson signs.
So is Delicious Heights ending now at this end of December?
Well, they took their tent down, I think, just,
Well, they probably are
Just
for the
this week,
winter,
actually.
yeah, for the winter.
Yeah.
November first, and construction first.
It was a state statute.
Okay.
Extended till November 3.
She knows everything.
Did you learn from Paul?
She's getting there. Okay,
Okay.
okay, so now we're adjourned. Okay.
Comment.
Motion to adjourn.
We did.
Again, we don't need to do it again.
All right.
Good job on that.